Hello, everybody.
If they're going to try and do that with the Social Democrats, that's going to
we are going to catch up
because
here.
The Social Democrats, while they also have definitely toughened on immigration, on border security, and so on, you've seen that already under Schultz. Their views are different, so that's already one of the sticking points you might see in potential coalition negotiations.
So, Chad, exit polls and early vote projections show the opposition Conservatives under Friedrich Merz are set to win the German vote with a defeat for the Chancellor, of course.
That's right.
And his Social Democrats. We're also just hearing from business lobbies that are now speaking out either with statements or reporters, your team, are reaching out to them. And German business lobby BDI is on the same page as the industrial union IG. Both are calling for Friedrich Merz to form a coalition government fast and without the far-right AfD. Can he do that? Do a coalition fast without AfD and maybe a two-party coalition?
He can do it fast if he can get the Social Democrats to go along with him. That would be the fastest option for him, if that's possible. We're still waiting to see how the numbers.
This is a little biography on the guy.
The numbers add up to do that. We had the Social Democrats holding their press conference about an hour or so ago, and one of the leaders of the Social Democrats was saying that you can renew yourself both in the opposition and also within the government. So they were already opening the door to the idea that they very likely may be in the next government. They also talked about changes within the party leadership that potentially can help. Olaf Scholz said he won't be part of any negotiations. So there are signs coming from the Social Democrats that they are opening the door to potential negotiations with the Christian Democrats.
Eric Nielsen reminded us that actually coalitions in Germany never come quickly, even with two parties. It feels like the sense of urgency we heard from Friedrich Merz tonight at that speech at CDU headquarters maybe change. How quickly can a coalition actually take place?
The issue is, do the Social Democrats want that coalition so quickly? The negotiation.
Yeah, this is a pretty good reaction from Merz. So this is what Merz said after the initial exit polls have come out. Hey, thanks for trusting. I'm glad we won. We have to quickly get a functioning government together, or else we're not going to be a very reliable government here. Let's listen to this guy saying.
In weeks, I heard someone talking about Easter. In my mind, I was thinking Easter, the whole world could have changed. Look at how quickly things are moving with Ukraine. So what their version of fast.
Oh, yeah. He's talking about the potential Putin-Trump meeting in Easter. Right.
For the moment, I think the business community will probably be assured this was the best case scenario for them, which is the possibility of a two-party coalition, reforms, debt break, and things that would be, I guess, more.
Well, they might get the debt break.
The Social Democrats, they want to spend money. They're saying that Germany needs renewal, that they want to.
The problem with the debt break thing is you need a supermajority. You need 2/3 of the Bundestag to vote on a modification to the debt break. So the way things have turned out so far, they might be able to get it through. But they're really going to need the AfD if they want that. And by the way, hello everybody. Thank you for joining in. We're going to be having some fun. You're just catching up on some live streams, seeing what everyone's saying.
Of the left party, Heidi Reicheneck, she was actually giving a speech in Parliament.
Which went viral, right?
The AfD has doubled in size.
And tailored in a way that it really fit the social media needs.
Oh, also, there was this thing I read. Actually, I'll just bring up the Discord because I've been putting the good stuff into the good old research forum thread for the German election here. And again, if you want to get into the Discord, hop in through the WAP. Just hit join with join Plan the Profit Discord turned on. Also, there's yeah, that's all good. It's all set up. Where is it here? Yeah. Unless the next coalition delivers, so whatever group of parties get together in the German Bundestag with the CDU, if they aren't able to get the debt ceiling passed, if they're not able to, essentially, if it's a very still close and very divided Bundestag, you're going to end up with potentially an additional boost in the AfD by the 2029 election or earlier. So before the end of this decade, we could see an AfD that's polling where the CDU is right now. So this is make or break time for the CDU. This is make or break time. So Merz has to get this debt break modification amendment in. All right, let's go back to the live streams.
Can really rescue Germany. Then he invited Alice Weidel to take part in what they call an X space, so a live conversation on X. And then he made an appearance by video link at an AfD rally. So these were all things that you would think, well, they would probably be favorable to the AfD. But simultaneously, there were other things happening that could also have contributed to the strong results of the AfD. For instance, this spate of attacks that we saw taking place that we were talking about earlier. So I think it's not really possible to kind of like pull apart, okay, what's the influence of Elon Musk? What's the influence of some of these other factors? And also you have to consider that it's possible that Elon Musk might turn off some potential voters from supporting AfD. He is, of course, he's not German. He's an outsider, kind of trying to wade into German politics. That is something that people, in many societies react to badly. We've seen, for instance, I think I remember in the Brexit campaign in the UK that Barack Obama sort of came in and he said, if Britain votes for Brexit, then it's going to have to go to the back of the queue for a free trade agreement with the United States. And this pretty much caused a more of a counter reaction of people are thinking, why are you wading into this? Yeah, so.
If I may add one sentence here, I mean, just don't forget that the AfD is in essence, it's an anti-American party. I mean, they have sympathies for Russia, not for the United States. Not if an American or, well, he's South African, but anyway. But
that's a misinterpretation.
If the US is interfering here, even in favor of the AfD.
Yeah, so that's obviously stupid, because if the AfD was actually anti-American, that guy is so stupid. If the AfD was actually anti-American, why would Trump and Elon Musk and all these MAGA people who are very pro-America go out of the way to support the AfD? You have Don Jr. supporting the AfD. You have Charlie Kirk supporting the AfD. You have all these really big, heavy hitters supporting the AfD in the Trump admin and his inner circle. So that's just a stupid interpretation right there. I do like this bit here on the right from Liam Halligan. Yeah. The European Central Bank recently acknowledged that, quote, headwinds to economic growth from factors like weak productivity make elevated debt levels and budget deficits more likely, boring stuff. But that's under the context of, but there's another danger looking to. For surging borrowing costs, some of the EU's largest economies, combined with sluggish growth, means the Eurozone is once again flirting with the debt crisis. Yeah, it's been like that for a good bit here, especially with all the money they're sending to Ukraine still. And the more money, since they had that meeting in Paris, right? The war party that went to Paris recently that wants them to even spend more money, right? They want to adjust the reason why a lot of these parties want to adjust the debt ceiling in Germany is so they can send more money to Ukraine, which is kind of hilarious because today we had that thing from Zelensky. Here, I'll open my profile here. I've started doing a few more tweets and I'm like, hey, Zelensky went ahead and posted this saying, hey, Zelensky says he's willing to quit the presidency if it means peace with Ukraine, which, that should be more bullish for the euro hearing that, because that means a higher likelihood of the war of Russia ending sooner. But he put a condition on it, and that's not what's in this title. Quote from Zelensky, if it means peace for Ukraine, if you really need me to leave my post as president, I am ready. I can exchange this for NATO membership. You know, Ukrainian NATO member. And I'm like, this is exactly what the Russians explicitly will not take. This is the exact reason why the war freaking started. So it's like... it's like, come on, Zelensky. What the hell? Yeah, so Russia would never take that condition. However, it's like that since he said he's willing to step down, I really wouldn't be surprised to see if these words, oh, I'm willing to step down, are spun and spun and spun as hard as, oh, what are those spin tops? There's like some cartoon toy thing, Bakugan or whatever the hell. I can't freaking remember. What's that? Is that what it's called? Bakugan, let's see here, images. Yeah. These things. These are monsters. These are toys I used to have as a kid. These are things you'd throw out and spin, and they'd attack stuff. Oh. Or Beyblades. Beyblades are the other ones. Yeah, these things, right? You go ahead and you rip these things, and you're just having two spinning tops fight each other. So all I'm saying is Zelensky's gonna get spun like a fucking toy over these statements so hard. He's gonna get pushed. He's just gonna get pushed. Like, the fact that he was willing to concede this like one little step, it's like, it's that whole thing about when you're trying to fight a fight, don't give the enemy an inch. I mean, first he gave Trump an inch by starting to make all these concessions around the rare earth materials in Ukraine. Then he gave another inch in saying this today. Even though he put this condition on it, people for political reasons are just going to ignore it, right, for their own political motivations.
Use immigration politics work in a potential coalition with the SPD?
Let's see here.
Yeah, that would be a tricky one. They would arguably have a much easier time with the far-right AfD, and I'm grateful that you pulled up those graphics there because they just show that Germany is a conservative-leaning society as of today, election day, and what the leader of the conservative CDU-CSU will now have to do is find some common ground with either the Social Democrats, who have rejected that very idea of rejecting migrants at the border as something that is simply against European law. There's a lot of debate about whether it is or isn't. And
unstoppable force, an immovable object.
At a party conference to extend rights for accepted asylum seekers here, people who have asylum, to bring their families here as well. Friedrich Merz wants an immediate stop to that. So that will be a very tough nut to crack in any coalition talks, and particularly if we have more than two parties involved.
And Germany's economy obviously has been a huge issue in this election campaign. Talk to us a little bit about
we got
what
a new print here.
Merz says he wants to do in terms of kickstarting the economy.
Well, he said he wants a migration turnaround. That means much tighter laws, essentially stopping people from entering. The Dublin Agreement, he says, simply doesn't work, but he would essentially try and pull up measures that would come out as the same result, which would mean that people come from a safe country. Germany is geographically right
Greece,
in the middle of the
right?
EU, people couldn't come in. He also wants an economic turnaround. He's completely against what the Social Democrats propose.
That's the leader of Greece congratulating Merz.
On any investment would be covered by the state. He wants to see significant tax cuts, and he is also the one who flags up how important it is to have a very fast negotiation, to have a functioning German government against the backdrop of those threatened tariffs by US President Trump, but also with challenges in China, where German automakers, who are really the drivers of the German economy, have been in the past. That's where they made their cash over the past couple of years, and that's where Friedrich Merz has already warned in a big foreign policy speech.
So now Elon Musk is saying he's going to support Vox. Trump to Spain conservative leaders, you're doing great.
Santiago, the leader of Spain's Vox party, Santiago Abascal.
All right. Thank God I made this thing. The Spanish general election. All right. Trump supports the dude. Trump supports Abascal. See, this is doing this sort of stuff is kind of important, so then you can go back in history and check stuff and how things have developed over time. It makes it really easier finding stuff out. And then also go ahead and put out that Musk supports Abascal as well. Now, just in case you need a quick link, if you're obviously someone in the Discord, I'm just going to put the link to this in the general chat, and then you can go here and hit follow. If this is something, you know, don't get me wrong, a lot of people consider, you know, Spanish politics to kind of be like quote unquote minor compared to Germany and France, but it's really culturally important. Look, get most of the people around the world, when they want to take a vacation, a lot of people go to Spain. It's a great place to go when you want to go on vacation. A lot of people have second houses in Spain, to say the least. So, you know, it's culture. Spain is very, 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 very much still insanely culturally relevant. Again, if you don't know much about European politics, you're not going to pay much attention to it, no problem. But, you know, if you want to learn more about the world and, you know, you want to be prepared for the euro, any euro moves, because guess what, you know, you can have surprise moves in the euro come from I remember one time we had a huge surprise Spanish employment number come out, and that moved the euro like 80 plus pips at the time. It was insane. Let's see here, German federal election. Alrighty. Let's keep the stream going. Let's keep this going.
That he no longer sees.
Quietly hear a little bit of the last little bit.
Let's actually hear Bloomberg for a sec.
Let's get back to Chad Thomas, who is in charge of our Europe coverage. Chad, again, there's going to be a lot of negotiation, and I imagine that everyone at CDU is just going through the state broadcasters to try and understand the numbers, because those couple of seats make a huge difference on who they can form a government with.
Yeah, everyone is watching very closely. Does the BSW, this far left party, and or the FDP get into parliament? Because if they do, then the math just doesn't add up for that two-party coalition, and then they're going to need a third partner, whether that is then the Free Democrats or it's the Greens. The Greens looks like would be one that would be pretty difficult given the tone of the campaign, the fact that they were attacking Habeck as being an inefficient economy minister, and they've never been in a government with one another. another together as well. On the other hand, you and I were talking about this a little bit ago, the Social Democrats and the FDP, there's no love lost between those two parties after their government together, the one that is on its way out now. So if they have to have three parties in this government, it gets pretty tricky.
Chad, let's also go to Washington. Joining us now is Constance Stelzenmüller, director of the Center on the United States and Europe at the Brookings Institutions. Constance, thank you for joining us. No matter who builds the government or what kind of coalition, will Donald Trump try and bulldoze and I guess maybe humiliate Germany?
I don't know. You'd have to ask somebody else that.
Okay, what do you think the negotiations, when you look at the coalitions, what kind of change do you think it will mean for the U.S. and Germany relationship going forward?
Well, the U.S. government, the Vice President of the United States, and Elon Musk have both made it very clear that they would prefer the anti-system party, extreme right party, AfD, to govern Germany. That's not going to happen because the winner of these elections has formally excluded that, as have all other German democratic parties. So it's anybody's guess how they will react to that, but they, I don't think, are going to get what they would like.
So what happens, again, the Europeans need, and I think you've repeated this many times, need a strong Germany. Given the results so far in Germany, do you think we'll get a stronger Germany than we've seen so far?
I think that depends. Germany faces a multitude of problems, a number of them self-inflicted, and they're on multiple fronts: domestic, economic, and a very dark foreign and security geostrategic landscape. Right now, it looks as though, based on the current prognoses, the CDU's results are under 30%. That's a real disappointment and will undercut Merz's legitimacy. He had hoped for something clearly above 30%. Then there's the question already mentioned by your colleagues, whether the Liberals will get back in or not, and whether Merz has to form a three-party coalition or a two-party coalition. That also could make governing more difficult, especially since this short but nasty election campaign was marked by some really, I think many German voters, including me, thought unnecessary mutual vilifications among parties that are going to have to be partners with each other one way or the other.
Constance, can you give me a sense of Trump 2.0 seems to be very different. I know we're just over the 100 days, but it seems very different, more organized. Wants his way, certainly when it comes to foreign policy, to the first time round. What is the right way of Europe to deal with that?
I think the right way is to not let ourselves be split by the Chinese, by the Russians, or by this American administration. I think you will see in the coming week, the coming 10 days, a number of European efforts at coordinating policy and at making sure that on the key issues of Europe's economic and political survival, we are on the same lines. And it's unfortunate that this administration appears to express a strong preference for the German hard right, and presumably also for other hard rights in Europe. But that is still a minoritarian position in Europe, and is not unlike what the administration had suggested, as it were, the true will of the people. In Germany, if the prognoses remain correct, 80% of voters have voted against the hard right, and at an extraordinarily high, historically high voter participation rate of 84%. There is no lack of clarity there.
Constance, thank you so much for joining us. Constance Stelzenmüller, there, director of the Center on the United States and Europe at the Brookings Institution. So let's get back to Oliver Crook, who joins us from CDU headquarters in Berlin. Again, Ollie, the focus is frankly on the smaller, of course, parties and whether the CDU will be...
when it comes down to people like that woman, it's just constant bashing. AFD is a libertarian party, not a far right party. Like how many times does that need to be said? It's disingenuous, and it's going to lead Germany ultimately down the path where they're going to have their own Trump moment if people like that continue to hold the main microphone to try and maintain the zeitgeist. They won't be able to contain it. They'll eventually get run out. So, I sure as hell wouldn't be surprised, given all these very cocky reactions to the AFD doubling its size in the parliament, doubling its win in this election, that these people could say, oh, in the last election, 90% of people voted against the AFD. No, that's a shitty way of framing it. They voted for other parties that they preferred. And now in this election, 80% of people voted for parties that they preferred that were not the AFD. But for a party to double like that, I mean, you're going to end up with AFD and Reform in the UK and Vox in Spain and a National Rally in France. I mean, and then the party in Italy, the name escapes me at the moment. And you could very, very easily have all of that before the end of the decade. Very easily. Especially if the CDU tries and tries and tries to work with these anti-immigrant parties, and they're not able to get jack through. It's going to lead to an earlier election in Germany before 2029. It's going to. So, I'm just glad that I've started educating myself more so about European politics now. A lot of Americans have shifted their focus on European politics, especially recently, because we want to see Trump succeed in formulating peace between Ukraine and Russia, right? Like the people who are like, oh man, Russia is so evil, haven't known how close the world was going to end if Hillary Clinton actually got into office. I mean, if you actually had friends who were impacted by that evil regime, if you actually knew the type of corruption that was going on to, fellow guys in the military who were treated so unjustly and killed, like, that, remember, that's like when Edward Snowden came out and said, hey, the government's spying on everyone's communications, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And then you got all this shit going on with Clinton and the bitch bleed. And it's like, it's during that regime in second term Obama that we had to deal with all this stuff with Ukraine bubbling to the top. And those were the people responsible for letting the coup happen in Ukraine. And so this conflict is not like, it's like the same thing with Israel and Gaza, right? It's not a conflict that's like, oh, this is like something that's been brewing only for like the past 4 or 5 years, right? And it has ignited in the last, 2 or 3. This is something that has 10, 20, 30, 40 years of history behind it. Oh my God. Remember that meme of the, what were those Putin Tucker Carlson memes? a Putin Tucker interview meme where it's just like, yeah, 2 hours of Putin's 1 minute history lesson. Where, oh my god. Yeah, Putin explaining the Ukraine war to Tucker Carlson. Oh my god.
So do you see the supernatural at work as you look out across what's happening in the world now? Do you see God at work? Do you ever think to yourself, these are forces that are not human?
No, to be honest, I don't think so. My opinion is that the development of the world community is in accordance with the inherent laws, and those laws are what they are. Same.
Okay, that's not the clip I was looking for. I'm fucking Diane Tucker's nervous laughing, trying to salvage the interview. Meanwhile, Putin just roasting him for interrupting him 24 minutes autistic rant about 16th century border politics.
You didn't make this case in public until 2 years ago, February. And in the case that you made, which I read today, you explain at great length that you felt a physical threat from the West in NATO, including potentially a nuclear threat. And that's what...
Oh yeah, you know, remember that thing Zelensky said earlier? Saying, hey, yeah, I'll resign from Ukraine only if you allow Ukraine to join NATO. I'll resign then. It's like, how deaf and dumb are these people?
And that's what got you to move. Is that a fair characterization of what you said?
I understand that my long speeches probably fall outside of the genre of the interview. That is why I asked you at the beginning, are we going to have a serious talk or a show? You said a serious talk, so bear with me, please. We're coming to the point where the Soviet Ukraine was established.
And that's not me laughing, that's just the other guy. Yeah, now he's just going to the history.
In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and everything that Russia had generously bestowed on Ukraine was dragged away by...
Dude. Oh my god, man. That was so funny. I've even forgot what point I was oh yeah, it's like the same thing with Gaza and Israel. It's like, yeah, there's context behind it and it goes back 10-20 years, but arguably the history over the last 20 years with Russia Ukraine is, I'd say, easier to follow. I mean, that's just my opinion, right? I don't follow the Israel-Gaza stuff too closely. There is a thread here we have in the Discord of, okay, here's all the breaking news, here's all the Reuters reports, here's all the headlines, here are all the things that we're finding, right? So we're keeping an eye on it. And so far, it doesn't seem like it's going to continue escalating. But so far, everything seems, so far so good. All right, so they're on break over here.
Because it really was one of two major issues in this election. We had migration and we had the economy. So, Marcus,
yeah, was there like a stabbing just a couple days before the election
in Germany's economy?
Well, the question might be simple, but the answer is very complicated because if you look at the German business model, I mean, to put it very simply, we were relying on cheap gas from Russia. We were relying on selling our products to a very hungry Chinese market, and we were having our security from the United States.
Oh my god!
All those
oh my
pillars,
god!
They all kind of
I don't think I should play that. So oh my god! And that's a clip from
the whole model.
Oh, okay, that's May. Oh my god! I'm like, what the hell?
How to do business. if we are going into a trade war with the United States, which is very likely. I mean, Donald Trump has already announced that he's going to increase tariffs by 25% on German cars and on German
here you go.
aluminum and steel. This is going to have another very bad effect on the German economy, which is, as we just saw already, in recession. So we need new markets. We have to rethink our products, and our labor market is in a very dire situation because we are lacking skilled labor. So there are so many things at the same time he has to pull off, and he has to find new avenues.
German authorities said Syrian suspect was intending to, quote, kill Jews when he stabbed a tourist in Berlin on Friday, just before the election the other day. Oh, he did it. Oh my God. A 19-year-old refugee was detained shortly after the attack Friday night on a Spanish tourist inside the city's sprawling Holocaust memorial opposite of the U.S. Embassy. The Berlin police and general prosecutors said in the state. It's like, how stereotypical could this attack have been? A refugee attacks a tourist. A Spanish tourist, you know, the Vox people who we were just literally talking about, right? Let's see here. Right? We were just talking about these guys. Oh, attacks a Spanish tourist. Okay. Across the Holocaust Museum in front of the U.S. Embassy. Like, oh my God, man. What a mess. What an absolute mess. Premeditated over several weeks. It's like
so
it's going to be impossible to get a coalition going. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, immigration is more central to AFD's pits, whereas MERS has but a bigger emphasis on the economy. Let's see here. We have to assume an anti-Semitic background. French President Emmanuel Macron said we stand in solidarity. Oh, he called it an act of Islamist terrorism. Okay. Alrighty. Okay.
So major problems for the automotive industry, and you know the Friedrich Merz has been saying, well, you know, we're going to, for instance, slow down.
Looks like this stream is over.
And regulatory pressure to move faster into EVs, for instance, from kind of bad news in several years. You know, I mean, there was the pandemic, but that was global, of course. Every country had that. But the pandemic came, and then the war in Ukraine came. And there's this sense that the economic problems came, and there's this sense that there hasn't been a kind of a turn for the better, that it hasn't happened yet. And I think this is going to be a big part of the pressure on this new government, is to try to kind of generate this sense of, okay, something's going to get better now. Something
like optimism.
Instill some optimism in the public, because it's been so unremittingly negative in recent years. And now, on top of all of this, you know, there's this angst about what is going on with Donald Trump, and is he really kind of massively going to abandon the Europeans? So I think this is going to be one of the big sort of goals of Friedrich Merz and this government, if he gets it together, is to try to generate that. And we saw in his speech just earlier where he was sort of talking it up and saying, you know, it's going to be time to get to work. You know, he needs it. I think we're going to hear a lot of that kind of message, to try to kind of transmit the feeling, all right, let's get down to it. We can get on top of it. We can sort it. Because they know if they don't manage, and the German economy continues to slide for the next few years, then we're back to that point. What happens in 2029? Then they have big trouble then.
Yep.
Jared, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, because Friedrich Merz...
Yeah, if they don't get immigration and if they don't get the economy moving the way they want it to move, or if Merz is just totally incompetent with negotiating with Trump, like, no, not going to work.
Probably want like migration, and he was maybe forced into the back foot on that.
Yeah, so they did want to make this campaign about the economy as the central issue, and where the Conservatives felt that they had their sort of strongest pitch. And I know that some of the Conservatives were then frustrated with Friedrich Merz that he did this gambit in Parliament that we were talking about earlier, where after one of these attacks that has taken place in Germany a few weeks ago, he decided that he had to make some bold move in Parliament to try to show that, okay, I'm on top of the migration issue. You can trust me to do that. You don't need to vote AFD in order to take care of this issue. And this unleashed this huge debate then about this firewall between the Conservatives and the AFD, rather than a debate about the parlous state of the German economy. So I know some of the Conservatives were frustrated with Merz for shifting focus for at least 2 weeks to what he was up to in Parliament and how to deal with the AFD and this issue of migration, where the Conservatives are seen with suspicion because a lot of the immigration took place under Angela Merkel from the Conservatives, instead of focusing on the economy. So for many of Merz's critics, they see that as a major own goal in this campaign.
All right. I think we have got another update for our viewers. Is that right? Do we have another update? Because I think we've got some more.
We've got some
projected results. That's right.
Exactly. Yep. I've got them here, and I can bring those to you. We can bring up the projected results, which indicate. Yes. So I've got the numbers here. All right, we can bring those up in a second. The CDU-CSU Conservative bloc on 28.6%, the Alternative for Germany 20.4%, the second largest party. So they have, according to these projected results, gotten over the 20% mark. The Social Democrats 16.3%, the Greens 12.3%, the Left Party 8.5%, the Bundesräte Wagenknecht just under this 5% hurdle for the lower house of the Bundestag. They're on 4.9%. Same story with the FDP, the Free Democrats, who we were talking about a bit earlier, on 4.7%. And the plus and minuses you're seeing on your screen, they indicate they're a comparison to the last federal election. So you can see how the parties have done either worse or better compared to 2021. Let's look at the distribution of seats too. The SPD 119 seats in the 630-seat Bundestag. The CDU, CSU Conservatives on 187, the Greens on 80, the Free Democrats 33 seats, the Alternative for Germany on 133, the Left Party on 56 seats. Now, the
Nazi comparisons just keep coming. Oh my God.
The possible coalitions, Social Democrats 119 and the CDU-CSU 209 seats, which would give them enough seats to make up a majority.
All right, we're going to bring our viewers back into the studio now. So we've been talking about the economy, about what needs fixing. And Richard, you were talking about this sense of malaise that Germans seem to be feeling now, you know, whether it's increased heating bills or simply the fact that the trains don't run on time anymore, which is a big discussion here. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, young people, young voters? I mean, are they worried about
Musk loses, dude.
About pensions looking ahead?
No, he did not lose big. AFD doubled in size.
Worried, and
they're plus 10.
That also in the parties that they're voting for. So I was just looking at some data earlier that they've broken pretty strongly for the AFD. And also for the Left Party. So the kind of this surprise upswing that the Left Party, so basically one of the furthest left parties in German politics, pretty old school, for redistribution of wealth, very pro-immigration, a party that had almost been given up for dead last year because it suffered a split where one of the main figures in the party, called Sarah Wagenknecht, she split away and created her own party, which we've also seen in these projections, called the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, or BSW in the German initials. And she abandoned the party because she basically said, it's gone too woke. It's not concerned with working class people and proper kind of good, honest sort of socialist values anymore. And it's sort of highfalutin stuff about gender and all of this, and not about, the good, honest basics. This was her kind of message. And
some real communism,
that the left party, the people who are more progressive on these issues would find a home in the Greens, and she would take the more kind of conservative strain of working class voters from that party. It looks like, though, maybe she's potentially not going to manage to get into parliament, or we'll see how these numbers shape up. But the left party has got a big late sort of upswing. I think part of that, we were talking about that earlier, that they've been beneficiaries of what Friedrich Merz did, this gambit to get sort of a motion through Parliament about migration, which got the support of the AfD. This sense that the left had to rally against that. But also, I think it's partly a response to the centre-left parties, so the Social Democrats and the Greens, inching rightwards on immigration, talking more openly about the need for deportations, for people who had no right to stay in Germany, or for people who had been involved in crimes. And so a kind of a perception that the centre ground of German politics is moving rightwards, and that even the centre-left parties are moving rightwards, and that one party had to be the holdout of saying, no, and really the left parties say, we just oppose deportations, full stop. There is a part of the public that is really open to that. I think there's an interesting parallel towards what happened in the US election last year. And actually, if you look at the issues of this election, they're
Richard,
very much...
I'm going to stop you there, I'm sorry, because I'm just hearing that we are getting to a point in the evening in which the Chancellor candidates basically get together for an on-air roundtable debate. This is their chance to react, to give their reactions to the projected results, and we're going to cross to that debate right now and have a listen in.
And a very good evening and welcome to the Berlin Roundtable after very exciting elections 2025. And we are traditionally discussing with the parties that will form the next parliament in Germany. It's still not certain. We've invited all of them. A very good evening for me as well. Who's going to enter into coalition with whom? Who's going to be in the German lower house of parliament, the Bundestag? That's what we'll be discussing in this show with these guests. And they're all here with us today. The German Chancellor, the incumbent Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. And for the Union Bloc, we'd like to welcome Chancellor candidate Friedrich Merz and the AfD Chancellor candidate Alice Weigel. And we have Green Party Chancellor candidate Robert Habeck. We've got the CSU party leader Markus Söder.
Wow.
And we've got from the left party Jan van Aken and the FDP Christian.
So
Lindner.
all the leaders are here.
Unfortunately, we haven't got Sarah Wagenknecht from the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, but we've got Amira Mohammed Ali, and we're discussing on the basis of the projected results that we've got here. The FDP and the BSV were at 5% and would have overcome that hurdle, but now both of them are just under the 5% hurdle, but we're still going to be talking with all of the party leaders. And at one point we do have clarity, that is the SPD result. We'd like to begin with you, Mr. Scholz. Serious losses for the Social Democrats. You have already admitted defeat. Clearly the voters didn't want to give
Kick him while he's down.
after the collapse of the coalition. Was it a mistake to run? No, I don't believe it was a mistake. It was to do with the fact that the voters had to decide about the future of Germany. We thought it through very well. It's a bitter result for the SPD. We all worked very, very hard in Germany and spoke with the citizens here. I felt a real sense of solidarity, many who were supporting us with their whole heart. So it's very bitter to admit defeat here, but that's how it is. On an evening like this, we ask about personal consequences. You've already said you are going to remain acting chancellor, but your party has already said we need to have a change of generation. Is it the end for you now, after this? Well, obviously, I wanted to be chancellor, and I wasn't pursuing any other position in the government, and I will continue to take that position. That is my stance. Now, Mr. Merz, very likely you are going to be the new Chancellor of Germany. You have emerged the strongest party. It's a very impressive result. But in some ways, you can say it isn't. You are going to need two coalition partners, maybe, on top of your sister party. That'll be difficult.
We have won these elections in a very clear manner. I want to thank those who voted for us. But those who didn't vote us, I want to tell them that I'm going to make an effort to form a German government, which is going to represent the entire German population, and I will make an effort to form a government which is going to tackle and solve the problems of our country. And how this government is to be formed is something that we do not know at this point in time, and not so a secret that I would wish to need only one and not two coalition partners. But it's the voters who decided, and we are going to have to accept this result.
Now, a coalition between the SPD and the Green Party, is that going to be unavoidable because it won't be enough? But a coalition like that is an option.
I've always been saying that we're not going to go into a coalition with the AfD, and the voters of AfD knew that before. They voted this party in spite of that. And now we need to find ways to form a government. And this is something that is going to become clearer in the course of this evening once the final results have become clear. We don't want to speculate.
Now, you've referred to the AfD. Ms. Weidel is with us. Your party was massively successful. You've doubled your results from last time. At the same time, Mr. Merz is saying clearly that he will not enter into a government coalition with you. So at the end of the day, if you voted for the AfD, did you waste your vote? No, not at all. We got the historically best result we've ever had. We've doubled over 3 years the result then, and we've only been in existence for 12 years, so it's a huge success for us. We are now really a big tent party. We're going to expand on our strategic position, which was always my personal aim. And as I said beforehand, our hand will always be outstretched to take part in the government. We will support the union when there are motions we approve of, because the vote of German citizens is clear. They want a political change. They want a coalition between the AfD and the Christian Union bloc. But we have to accept that. Mr. Merz has excluded that. But it's a Pyrrhic victory for the Union bloc. And the CDU and the CSU will have to explain to their voters how they are going to work with the Social Democrats or the Green Party and adhere to their successes. Staying with your party now, if your hand is outstretched, what compromises would you make? I don't think we'll have to make major compromises because the CDU has essentially copied our party policy. They've taken on all of our stances, all of our positions. You can do that, of course, but they're not going to be able to implement them with left-wing parties. And this is why our hand will remain outstretched to take part in the government. We can talk. Mr. Merz doesn't want to talk to us. Perhaps others in the CDU do. But let me tell you that when they enter into a coalition with the Green Party and the Social Democrats, that coalition will not last 4 years. Merz will be the interim chancellor, and in the years to come, we will overtake the union. Have the voters voted for the AfD?
I can't see that. The opposite is true. The voters of the CDU, CSU and those of the AfD knew that there wouldn't be any cooperation between the two parties and Ms. Weidel. There are fundamentally different positions in terms of foreign policy, security policy, and many other areas. With regards to the topic Europe, NATO, Euro, you can hold an outstretched hand as much as you want. We do not follow a wrong policy. The heritage of the CDU will not be questioned, a heritage of 75, only because there is a so-called alternative for Germany. You want the opposite of what we want.
Now let's ask the person who's between you, who has a word to say, Mr. Söder from the CSU. Is that an offer you can never refuse?
Well, to start with, it's very clear that we have won the elections, and in Bavaria we gained above proportionally and received one of the best results of Germany. But one can sense the uncertainty of Germans. Many are feeling uncertain whether the direction of politics is going to be changed. There will be some who got stuck with the AfD, but do the Germans really, do the majority of the Germans want to get out of the European Union? Do they want to have a Eurasian community of interest, like Höcke said? This would make us to be a satellite state of Moscow. Nobody wants that. But we are going to organize a change of direction in Germany. And I made a pledge myself, which was that the CDU, CSU is going to work together and stick together. And we're happy that Friedrich Merz has the opportunity to be Chancellor.
Now, you said you didn't want to work with the Green Party, but that's a coalition promise you may not be able to stick to if the majorities don't allow it.
Now, when you look at the polls of the ARD, the broadcasting station, if we follow these forecasts, we can hold this pledge, but the ZDF is a little bit more wobbly.
We've got projected results that we believe.
Well, yeah, let's get back to serious, because it's serious business. We do not believe that we can organize a change of political direction together with the Greens in important questions like migration, economic policy, that it would become better. It was an election campaign which was bizarre, where you didn't know what their goals are. So I would say, if we can manage, we are going to stick to what we have said before. I don't want to give instructions to the Chancellor, to the candidate of Chancellor, but it's very clear that the government without the Greens is a better government.
But if you're saying if it's possible, is that a door you're trying to get in?
No, it just means that we still have to wait and see what the final result is going to be like.
Okay, well now let me ask Robert Habeck, as the only party from the former coalition, you didn't suffer too much. You've lost a few points, but not terrible. Are you relieved that it isn't even worse? Or are you disappointed that what you wanted to achieve, you didn't achieve? Well, let me congratulate Friedrich Merz. Just say I did it very briefly. Clearly, the union bloc can form a government. Congratulations. And now we have to take the necessary responsibility, because Europe and Germany are being pulled in all directions from within as well. And so the country has to find its feet quickly, make big decisions quickly. And it would seem that we have to look at how we can do this. The left party will need more economic impulses. We have to look at how we're going to make progress. It's going to be difficult, and normalizing the AfD in the election campaign has increased. So there's a lot that needs to be done. But having said that, I would say it's an okay result, not a fantastic result. We were not punished for the coalition as much as we might have. Of course, we were aiming higher. We didn't get there. But the result is mixed. But you would want to enter into the government. We weren't able to improve our result because after the vote in the German parliament, where the CDU worked together with the AfD, we said, right, we're going to go into the opposition. We'll never work with Friedrich Merz again. We didn't do that. And some young progressive voters made us pay the price for that. We had to pay that price, because there's no way I could take that option. I want us to take on responsibility and implement change. And so,
yeah, just not the change that makes immigration not a problem anymore
China,
and enforces border security, right?
Sorry, not China, but if we're trying to go for a coalition with the Union Bloc, Social Democrats and Greens, then we have to look at that option. Or if the SPD won't come in, then it would be a Union Bloc, Social Democrat coalition. We'll have to see what happens. But if we do end up with the Union Bloc, Social Democrats and Green Party, yeah, we've paid a price for it. Now, if we're talking about a Union Bloc, Social Democrat and Green Party coalition, which we sometimes call the Kenya coalition because of the colors of the flags. Now, Jan van Aken, you're going into the opposition, but you're not going to be outer parliamentary opposition, which would have been an option for you. And now we've got 3 constituencies that your top people are in. You'll be entering into the parliament. That's not so important because you've got a very strong result. We can see that already. Now, did you lack faith in your own party, or why did you go for this 3-pronged approach? You didn't think it was really an option?
Well, I said in October during our party convention that we can manage 7%. We got more. I wouldn't have expected that. But one must not underestimate this interplay between having the fight for direct mandates. I think we've got 7 or 8 constituencies
Mers
where
was the
got a
chairman
mandate, and that tells
of a supervisory board at BlackRock.
In Parliament, we don't give away our vote, and this is what brought us into Parliament.
So total opposition, which is something we just heard, is something that we associate
it's like
with
Mark Carney in Canada.
When you've got such a strong result, to what extent will you be approaching other parties when it's about looking at other coalitions?
We're always ready to talk. There's no question about that. It's not the question that anybody would enter into a coalition with the Die Linke, with the left party. So we're going to be in opposition both in Parliament and on the street out there. I worked with Greenpeace for many years. You don't have to be in government necessarily. Even if you're in a opposition position, even out of Parliament, you can change things and win things. And that's our goal. With 8.8% being a member of Parliament, we're going to make the life difficult for Friedrich Merz when he wants to attack the social welfare state.
Christian Lindner, the FDP, has reduced its result by half. You started in the evening with a 5, so you'd have overcome the 5% hurdle. But at the moment, we're seeing your results being 4.8, which means you wouldn't have overcome that hurdle into Parliament. Now, if you land at 5%, it's still a bitter defeat, isn't it? What consequences will there be?
Yes, it is a defeat for the FDP, but it is hopefully a win for Germany. We didn't manage to use the successes that we managed during the coalition government to bring it across to the broad population. And we took up the end of the coalition government and weren't able to explain it to the voters so that voters would give us a new mandate. That's obviously the case. We don't know the final result of this election, but I'm realistic, of course. It is imaginable that the FDP will have to restructure itself in terms of its personnel, and politically, when we have to leave Parliament, I will also have to leave my position. I've been the chairman of the party for 11 years. It has always been a privilege. It has always been an honor and obligation for almost 25 years. I was voted into Parliament by citizens. I started out as the spokesperson for the children and youth policy in the State Parliament of North Rhine-Westphalia. I became the chair of the parliamentary group in Parliament. And Ms. Schausen, if my political career ends tomorrow, then I will go with one feeling, namely the feeling of gratitude.
But it sounds like you're saying goodbye already.
No, I'm just going to keep on observing how the election results are going to develop, and if that is the final result, then I will make sure that my party is going to be able to find new personnel and new direction, and I will not run again. And my leadership claim for the FDP will have expired. The FDP will have to have a fresh start, and that is what I wish our state. And this is also why I wish Friedrich Merz all of luck during his
now,
next
Ms. Mohammed
tasks.
Ali, the situation for the Sarah Wagenknecht alliance is a bit different. You're not going to enter into the parliament, we think, but maybe you will manage the 5% hurdle. Now, the party founder, Sarah Wagenknecht, was going to be here. She didn't come. Is that a sign that she's perhaps going to pull out of politics if she can't overcome the hurdle? No. If it should pan out that we do not overcome the 5% hurdle, some of the projected results take us over it, sometimes some don't, then obviously we will analyze these results and undertake the future steps. But let me say that even if we don't manage to get into Parliament as the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, we have achieved something in the time that we've been running. We got over 5 or 6% in the EU. We're in 3 state assemblies. And should we not manage it into Parliament, we will only just have not managed it. So these are big successes that we will also be pleased with. Now, if you do manage to get it into Parliament, how bitter is it to know that the party you split off, the Left Party, has succeeded so much more than you? Well, I don't have a problem with this. I mean, we're 2 different parties, and we're looking at what it is that our policy is. Now, if the SSW is in the party, or rather, the BSW party gets in, that's going to make it more difficult to you. If you have these smaller parties in there, you're appealing to the responsibility of everyone. How quickly do you think you can create a coalition based on 3 or 4 parties?
Ms. Charleston, I believe that we need to wait and see until the final votes have been counted so that we know what we are going to deal with from tomorrow on and what we're going to talk about from tomorrow on. The formation of a government is going to be a difficult task. That is something we knew already before the election. It's going to be probably more difficult than we initially thought, but when it comes to a swift formation of a government in Germany, there is no alternative to that. Since 6th of November, we are with a government which doesn't have a majority in parliament. We need to be able to act on the international level. And Mr. Scholz, I believe that for the interim time, we're going to find a reasonable way so that we can come to agreements so that in this time between the elections and the formation of the government, how we could continue with our daily political life. This is going to be an interim phase. But I stay with my hope that until Easter we're going to have formed a government because it's urgent. The world is not waiting for us. Europe is waiting for Germany, for us to take on a stronger leadership role.
Now, Mr. Scholz,
he wants it done by Easter before Trump and Putin have their meeting by Easter.
You will make the handover to Mr. Merz easier by taking him along to Brussels or France or whatever? Well, as finance minister, but I think we're going to find ways of talking about policy internationally in Germany. I mean, everything else would be silly. Mr. Merz, let me ask you, if you appeal to everyone, it has to be fast, everyone has to be prepared to enter into coalition negotiations, then your tone has changed within less than 24 hours, because even yesterday, part of electioneering, you did an awful lot to break a lot of porcelain, particularly with the SPD. Yesterday, you compared about them very bitterly.
No, there is no reason to complain about my election speech yesterday in Munich. At the end of this speech, I talked to the demonstrators out there on the street, the so-called Antifa, who were on the street, and you know the background of this movement where these guys come from. I didn't attack the SPD as a party. We had a dispute about matters, and in the end of January, where we had this motion and this vote on this motion, I told colleagues that there is not only 23rd of February, but there will be a 24th of February, and we're going to continue talking reasonably after the election. And I'm happy to have had this dispute in a very tough manner, which made the differences so clear. We have a high voter turnout, which is a good sign for our democracy, which legitimizes the Bundestag in a very stable manner. And our mandate is to use this election result in a reasonable manner. And the voters are right. They have taken their decision. Our task is to take this election result and form a government on that basis.
At the same time, I think Mr. Habeck was shaking his head a little bit. He didn't experience as very conciliatory yesterday. You said the left is over, you know, the Green Party nutters you talked about. And that was targeting demonstrators. Mr. Habeck, how did you see it? It doesn't really matter how I saw it. Okay, fine. You heard the response, Mr. Merz.
Well, I have also not been dealt with in the smoothest and most mildly manner. I was called fascist, Nazi. If there is anybody to complain, it would be me, but I don't do it today.
So nobody's complaining. Okay, Mr. Scholz, for your party, would you say it's not about healing wounds, it's about looking forward, or is there something you need to make up for? The Social Democratic Party since the 19th century has been a party that has always taken on responsibility for democracy and justice and ensuring that our country is on the right course, and that will not change, even if it's been a bitter election defeat. But what that's going to mean in specific terms, how a government can be formed, these are all things we cannot predict at this moment. We don't even know the final election result. That's going to very much influence what the options are. And of course, it will be about issues that we'll have to discuss, but that's not going to happen this evening. Now, we could talk about a few issues. Mr. Merz, you were saying that from the very first day of your chancellorship, there will be a ban on entry into the country for people who want to come to Germany but cannot legally enter the country. Now, with your two coalition partners, I think that's going to become a bit complicated. And there's only one possible coalition partner with whom you could do that from day one.
Saying you need to go with the AFD.
Forget about this option. And do not follow the words.
You can see Alice is smiling because Merz is digging his own grave right now saying this.
The needs of Putin. And let me tell you something about the Migration Limitation Act that we proposed in Parliament. What this contains is almost identical with what we have agreed upon with the Social Democrats. Until 2023, it had already been anchored in German foreign residence law, and they also laid down in the coalition agreement of the SPD state premier of Brandenburg. It can't be so difficult to make these things, to do these things. We just have to talk about the European legal perspective. We've got a very clear position on that, but that we need to limit migration into Germany is uncontended, undisputed.
But it's not in law. You made a promise. You might not be able to keep it.
Right. I have the intent to keep this promise that I have made.
Now, Mr. Scholz, if we look at your party now and say, would you support Mr. Merz in that? Would you say this is something that he can do with the SPD from day one, very, very quickly, to agree this in coalition agreements? Well,
Make or break
even
time.
if it is your ambition to enter into conversations and discussions and exploratory talks that nobody's invited anyone else to, let me say that there is a position that we took that's very clear, which says that apart from improving the citizenship law that we have amended, we want to ensure prosperity for the future. We want to protect those who are being persecuted. Germany must always give them protection, and everything we're doing has to be done within the framework of EU law. And that is why it is very good that we managed last year to ensure that the number of people entering into Germany irregularly or illegally has dropped by 100,000. This year it'll be another 100,000. And that we have the European asylum system, which is law, has to be implemented, because many of the practical problems that we have with
shows so spineless.
Applied for asylum in a different European country.
This is why he lost the most during the election.
Now, the SPD, will you help Mr. Merz keep his promise? I said we're not going to break our promises. Are you going to be negotiating? I think you can assume you'll be invited to enter into a discussion. Well, we'll have to see what the final election result is, but if there are talks between the SPD and the Union, it's not going to be the
final
SPD
election results.
leading these talks. I said that the position I would like is German Chancellor, and this is the position that I talk to citizens about. It remains
he wants to be fucking Chancellor?
To be Chancellor of Germany.
He's delusional. He's not going to be Chancellor.
Be Chancellor in a CDU-led country.
Oh my God.
Is the SPD going to increase prices?
He says he wants to be Chancellor with the CDU.
Very much representing social justice, a stable pensions, statutory minimum wage. That's what we're aiming for. Now, Mr. Habeck,
it's like a huge middle finger to the CDU.
But if we're staying with migration policy, is this something where if you enter into a coalition with 3 or 4 parties,
good on
do you
the
think you will reach an
interviewers.
agreement and do it quickly?
They're pushing him on immigration, saying, hey, can you form a coalition and get immigration reform passed quickly? Because that's the one linchpin for Alice, for the AFD.
Which focuses on talks to be held later, then I'm worried, because there is no time to be lost. There are a lot of topics that are very urgent. The American government, I'm not talking about the Americans, but Donald Trump and the people around him are attacking the Western community of values. They let down.
Okay, so he's anti-American.
Ukraine, which is the worst kind of imperialism we're witnessing right now, and Europe needs to find its own strength in areas where it hasn't come to an agreement in terms of defense policy, foreign policy, and all that needs to be funded right now. Now, if we follow the normal game,
right? They want to print money for Ukraine. They don't want to print money for Germany. They don't want to print money for German border security.
Season, then we're going to fail historically. And everybody sitting at this table needs to understand that. And if we find an agreement, then my advice would be that this agreement needed to be implemented very swiftly. We cannot look into all the minutiae of heating installation and migration. No, we are in a historic situation which we haven't seen before. The Americans do not let down Europe. That even goes further. They work against Europe. That needs to be addressed and solved very fast, and the financial steps have to be taken very fast
now,
as
are
well.
these arguments that convince you, Mr. Söder, when it comes to the difficulties of foreign policy?
Well, to compare heat insulation and migration, compare that is bizarre. Maybe it was
doubles in shocker for German democracy.
We have experienced attacks, people dying. That cannot be compared to this heating legislation.
Live from Berlin, this is DW News. Our special coverage of the German election continues. A new parliament, a new government, and a new chancellor, all in the making. Tonight,
why are they cutting them off?
84% voter turnout.
They're literally talking right now. I don't want to listen to this guy. I want to listen to the actual political leaders speaking right now.
Seats in the new parliament.
Why are they cutting them off?
Is now all but guaranteed to become Germany's next chancellor. You see him right there. You can get used to hearing Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz declared victory just over an hour ago. All right, let me bring you up to date on what has been happening. Vote counting is still underway, but projected results indicate Germany's conservative parties have won this election. Conservative leader Friedrich Merz has claimed victory and said that he will get down to work on forming a coalition as soon as possible. He told supporters that he will try to form a government that represents the whole country. The far-right Alternative for Germany party managed to double its share of the vote and looks to be on course to come in second. However, it's very unlikely.
Libertarian, not far-right.
Coalition talks, negotiations, as the main parties have pledged not to cooperate with the AfD. Chancellor Olaf Scholz, he has acknowledged defeat and congratulated Friedrich Merz. He described the election as a bitter result for his Social Democrats. Let's take a look at the projected results in more detail. There's another loser of the evening. Appears to be the Free Democrat Party. It looks like that it has failed to pass the 5% hurdle needed to get into the Bundestag. That's the German parliament.
Oh, well, we already knew about the FDP not passing it. I think we're looking at BSW right now, if BSW gets in or not. Well, these are most of the results.
In a new government, and how much of a change is this?
The final results are
joined here at the big table tonight by my colleague Christine Munwa to my right here. Christine is monitoring the vote counting, and she is also fielding your comments and questions. If you're streaming and watching us on YouTube or Twitter, write to us, send us messages.
God, look at all this stuff.
Get to as many as we can. And to my left is our international editor, Richard Walker. He is here to walk us through these numbers and results tonight. And to my far right, I want to welcome Benjamin Tallis. He's an international politics.
That'd be 12:30. So in about 45 minutes, the final results come in. In about 45 minutes, the final results come.
So, Christine, take us through the numbers again. Tell us where we are right now.
Okay, I want to listen to what the German leaders were saying. So I'm going to do another search here for German federal election. Those are the exit polls. Why do they have so many streams here? Is this what we want? Nope. German election. Where are the live streams? God. After all the shit that's going on right now with Twitch, cutting back everyone's VOD hours, there's going to be a lot more people from Twitch uploading all their VODs to YouTube. And then it's just one step easier for them to start streaming on YouTube. And with that in mind, I'm like, okay, when will YouTube actually have a proper decent hub for finding live streams to make it easier for people to discover content? Okay, yeah, so there's a whole bunch of nothing. But I guess we're stuck watching this commentary. But, we're... So let me read this here on the side. We are on the fucking knife's edge of Kenya apocalypse. In Kenya apocalypse, in German polity, in the German politic, it's the SPD, the CDU, and the Greens. These three parties right up here. I'm just going to get the fancy drawing tool, that epic pen. The epic pen. I got a pen. I got pineapple. Pineapple pen. Okay. Enough of that. Let's see here. All right. What was I trying to do here? Yeah. Oh, wow. That's super thin. Okay. That's what she said. All right. Right here. All right. Let's try a different color. How about... There we go. All right. So we're looking at the Greens, the CDU, and the SPD. So that's these dudes here. That makes the Kenya flag. Yeah, all right, cool. Now that I've did my stupid drawing stuff, let's continue on with the damn quote. Okay. So, in Kenya apocalypse, when those three parties, the Greens, the CDU, SPD, get together, they form the main coalition, the ruling governing party of Germans, of the next German Bundestag. And in that coalition setup, the Greens and the SPD will not, these two parties will not do probably most, like 70 to 60% of the policies that the CDU, CSU actually want to get done. So the largest party in Germany is going to have to run with a lot of concessions in order to get these two leftist parties on board with them to form a majority, so that then they don't have to work with the AfD, these guys in blue. Which means what this guy is saying is Kenya Apocalypse is they will get no 5-point anti-migration plan, which is what has caused the AfD to boost up plus 10% in the first place. So if they don't get this done, you can bet your ass that between now and the 2029 election, they're going to be above, they're going to be easily in the mid-20s, upper 20s by the next election if they don't get this handled. So no 5-point anti-immigration plan, no repealed home heating ordinance. I gotta be frank, I don't really know what that is. CDU will get nothing. They'll get none of their major political goals accomplished. None of their major ones, at least. And CDU will be tempted to resist. And Greens plus SPD will then threaten to join the other two leftist parties and form a minority government in the third phase of voting, as I have explained. The only way to counter this threat will be for the CDU to violate the firewall and accept AfD support to form a minority government. Kenya Apocalypse. Man, if only it was easier to clip stuff on YouTube. Here, I'm gonna see if I can turn this music down just a little wee bit. There we go. I really don't want the... I'm absolutely certain that I'm talking way over the music, but it's just like... I can still hear it in the background very, very clearly on my end. Well, hopefully that was fun for you guys to hear on the reading side.
Exactly that. At the same time, he did use his final election appearance just yesterday.
Well, they could still govern with a minority and still try and get some stuff done. Essentially, the CDU will survive and won't lose a whole lot of voters, technically, if they actually work with the AfD. Actually, you know what? They might. But really, if there are voters who don't like the socialists, they like the CDU, but they're not as far right as the AfD, but then the CDU and the AfD work together, who are those voters going to vote for? It's not like there's an alternative party that they can go to. They'll just stay with the CDU. Those guys aren't going to realistically go anywhere else. So, really, CDU has a lot to lose if they don't get their act together and figure out how to get this stuff done. Even if that means working with the AfD, so then they, you know, one of the big problems is having a vote of confidence. So if there's another vote of confidence, it's very, very, very likely with this setup, we're going to get another election before 2029. So we can end up with an election sooner if it's a Kenya Apocalypse scenario, or an election later. So maybe you're talking like 2027, 2028, in a scenario where CDU and AfD work together. But also, Merz is just insufferable, he'll probably be insufferable to deal with geopolitically. Like the Trump administration, while Trump is congratulating these parties, they're not gonna be able to. MERS wants to increase the debt ceiling to send more money to Ukraine. Same thing with the red people here in SPD and the green people here in the Green Party. They want to increase the debt ceiling of Germany to send more money to Ukraine. AFD doesn't want to do that. So I don't feel totally comfortable with MERS being competent enough to actually handle trade negotiations with Trump over the next few years, and that will definitely hit all of the economic bullet points, because a lot of people who voted for the CDU this time around like, oh, the immigration isn't that big of a problem for me, but the economic issues certainly are, so I'm going to stick with voting for the CDU over the AFD. And guess what? If Trump comes in, talking politely but swinging a big stick, as Theodore Roosevelt once did, you're gonna end up with quite a few of those economic points not getting hit, and especially the debt break ordeal. That's just not happening. I don't see that happening here at all, unless for some reason they're willing to quote unquote break their firewall with the AFD so they can get that 2/3 majority to increase the debt break. But even then, the AFD might say, we'll vote for the debt break, but you have to give us these other concessions on immigration. Otherwise, it really makes no sense why we would give you this money, because you might just be spending it on more projects to give free money to all these people who are here illegally. So we don't want to increase the debt ceiling unless you're going to give us these, guarantees or sureties that we're going to have some kind of immigration reform too. So it's not going to work. This whole thing with the firewall with the AFD, it's like, it's really stupid character. It's really bad character. I mean, that's what you get for dealing with socialists and communists. This is it. That's what you get. And again, AFD's not far right. AFD's a libertarian.
And work out.
The woman we just saw, Alice Weidel.
Of course, a huge part of it comes down to Alice Weidel. She is someone who's been able to present a moderate face to this party. However, a lot of it comes down to the fact that in Germany in the last few years, we've been experiencing huge turmoil. We've seen turmoil with regard to the economy. The economy's been in recession for 2 years. We see a lot of concern and anger and concern about the war in Ukraine, anger about energy prices going up. The AFD has been able to tap into all of this anger and then add that to its core issue of migration, and we've seen irregular migration numbers going up in the last few years, and all of that together has really helped for the AFD to sharpen its profile, to define itself against
it's exactly what I just said. It's exactly what I just said.
The result of that, which is them coming a historic second place, the first time that a party other than the Social Democrats on the centre left and the Christian Democrats on the centre right has come in the first or second in a German election in the post-war era, Brent.
Matthew, I want to pick up on what we heard Alice Weidel saying there in that soundbite. I mean, is this the party's strategy? They did double their support for this election, but they're really waiting for the next election. And are they counting on this new government to be formed, whichever parties will be in it? Are they counting on that government to basically collapse and for there to be new elections, and that will be the time for the AFD to shine?
That's exactly what they're counting on, Brent. The mood in the room here tonight is that they want as many parties in the Bundestag as possible because that will make it more difficult for the centre-right Christian Democrats to form a stable government. That's exactly what they need because they know their argument is that a centre-right government in coalition with the centre-left parties or the Greens will simply not be able to agree on the big issue of migration. And therefore they're counting on that happening and there being a frustration and this issue not going away. And then the demographics will help them along the way as well. And the next time that they come to the polls, the voters will make them the top party in the German elections. And so there really is a sense here that although they might not be in the next government, they're playing the long game and they're hoping that they will be in the government after that. And the question really is whether we will see Alice Weidel continue to lead the party. I think that she will. This is someone who's been able to, as I say, present a very moderate side to a party that has very radical positions. That's because she's an economist. She's a woman in a very male-dominated
Going back to the
party.
Deutschmark is not that radical of a position.
Scrutiny in this election because of where she lives, the fact that she lives in Switzerland, because of the fact that she's a lesbian, and this is a very pro-family party. There was a heated row at the party conference last month. I was there, where people argued about what was in their election programme and the fact that she was a lesbian. Now, they'll put that to one side because they've just delivered the most historic result yet. And she
was
will
not expecting him to break that
lead
up.
the party into any future election that will come.
Matthew Moore at the headquarters of the AFD. Matthew, thank you. And if you're joining us, this is DW News special coverage of the German election. Christine Munwa is to my right here. She's got the numbers for you. To my left is our chief international editor, Richard Walker. And to my far right is Benjamin Tallis with the Democratic Strategy Initiative. Ben, let me just ask you, based on what we heard from Matthew there, are we basically just kind of biding our time, waiting for this new government to be formed and then to collapse so that we can have elections again?
That's what a lot of people think, but this is the challenge for Friedrich Merz and whoever governs with him, is that they have to find stability, but stability is not enough. Stability is not what Germany needs right now. It needs radical transformation and change. Merz is on record as saying Germany's business model is broken. We see a situation where Europe's security order is broken. We see barbarians at the gate in every sense, from whether they be from Moscow or from anti-democratic parties. So they have a real challenge to find both stability and that transformation
literal barbarians? Like,
Christy, you said
Ben, just one for you
literal
from our viewers,
barbarians.
who's asking that with the Greens out and they're characterizing this as a shift to the right, could a Merz-led Grand Coalition adopt a more sort of pragmatic stance on Ukraine, aligning better with the United States on the settlement in Ukraine?
Well, the thing is, that wouldn't be a pragmatic stance for Europe. It's always been the case that Europe is far more exposed to what happens in Ukraine than the United States is, which is why shadowing Biden's policy was bad enough. If Germany was to go with Trump's policy on this, it would be a disaster for European security. And given that Merz has said he wants to work closely with European partners and that he will be a change from Olaf Scholz, who was an obstructive blocker, I don't think that's a violent option.
But you said that they have to deliver.
Yeah.
I don't want to be cynical here, but can we really expect them to deliver if we're already talking about a new government that will have the Conservatives, but will also probably have the Social Democrats? That's the party that had a historic loss tonight and who gave us the current chancellor, who's going to have to be, well, he basically got fired tonight.
Yes, worst result for the SPD since 1887. And it's worth remembering the SPD has been in government for 23 of the last 27 years. But it depends which SPD turns up, because as you said, it's the end of Olaf Scholz. It's the end of that way of governing. And I think Germans have conclusively said they've had enough of that, which will be welcomed around Europe, to be honest. But which SPD is going to come? Is it the SPD of Boris Pistorius, of Lars Klingbeil, or of Rolf Mützenich?
Yeah. And what picture is Germany sending to the rest of the world, Richard, with where we are right now, with the fact that we've had early elections, we had one government that collapsed, we've got early elections, and we could have a coalition government that will have some of the familiar faces.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the way German politics goes, Brent. That, you know, it's a coalition
All right, guys.
system.
Tell me in the chat, do you guys think this is going to be good or bad for the euro? I have my thoughts. I have them written down in the chat with someone. Tell me your thoughts. Is this election result going to be bullish or bearish for the euro, and specifically the euro-dollar exchange
kind of showed up in governments? You had the Conservatives, Friedrich Merz, the CDU,
I'd
and
love
the CSU, which is the
to
Bavarian
start
wing.
hearing
You had the Social
some
Democrats, and then you had this third party, the Free Democrats, the ones who look like they've been kicked out from the parliament this time, as the sort of third party. And
Otherwise, I'm
usually
going to
you
keep
would
chatting with
one
the
of those big
people and the
parties
PMs and
with
the
Free
DMs
Democrats
and the
in,
whatnot.
and that's your coalition. And that's the way it works. And the Social Democrats and the Christian
And
Democrats
again,
usually got
if you want to hop
40+%.
on into the Discord,
Fast forward to now, and there are, how many parties have I got on my thing here?
Right.
So 7.
and you want to get into
Might
the
make it
research
into
forum where
this
we're watching all of the elections,
So you
just
have a
go
very
here.
fragmented landscape.
Link in the
So
description to
one
the
question
Discord.
is, will it end up being 7, or could it be 5? Yeah. So there are these two parties that are kind of right
Come
on the
say
edge:
hi.
the Free Democrats, and also this grouping called the BSW, the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, which was a splinter of a splinter of a splinter. You know, of one of the results of this process of
It's a
fragmentation.
good way of putting it, actually.
That came up last year. It kind of became a shooting star. It seems to have flopped a bit. Could still get in. If those parties don't get in, then we'll have 5 parties in the parliament. If they do get in, we'll have 7. If you have 7, then you will definitely need a 3-party coalition, almost certainly. And that is a recipe. I think you're asking, like, what is the rest of the world going to be thinking? The rest of the world is going to be worried about that because they've seen a 3-party coalition fail in Germany just now amid bickering. What was the reason for that bickering? It was partly having 3 parties, but it's also partly having to have parties that are just ideologically not good matches. And that was the case between these parties, where you had, the Free Democrats, this one party which are very orthodox on finance, and they had the finance ministry, so they held the purse strings. The other 2 parties wanted to spend more on things like green transition or infrastructure. It just didn't work. If you had a 3-party coalition emerging from this, which potentially has the Conservatives, but then 2 of those other parties from the previous coalition, they could end up fighting like cats in a sack. So I think that's the big question for the outside world. Okay, is it going to be 2 parties or 3? And which the second party is, well, at least there'll be some relief if there's only 2 parties and not 3.
Well, the world is looking at Germany, and people may or may not be familiar with Friedrich Merz, but let's just assume they are. Can we say that he maybe has...
My initial thinking was there'd be a relief rally that the AFD hadn't been dominant. I mean, that could certainly happen. Eurodollar certainly could. By the way, Eurodollar is right here on the chart.
In terms of, physically, one is very tall.
Oh, wow, look at that.
One is
Look at that expectation, right? Drawing from all the way out here, all the way to over here.
Sort of more reserved.
I think we're going to be topping out for the month here. I think this is it.
The tall man.
I think this is it. Let's go ahead. And by the way, if you want these indicators, links also in the description. You get it through the Boss Trading Group. There's a 10-day trial if you want to try these ones out. So check this.
Taking risks that aren't fully thought through.
Let's find out where the end of the month is likely to be. Oh, probably somewhere down here.
The jury's out on whether
Oh, probably somewhere around here, considering how high up we are. Now let's do one more thing.
We don't know. I mean, Angela Merkel, she managed to manage 4.
Here, we'll put this guy on mute for just a moment. I want to check out my timing dots. And I want to increase this by, I think, 2 more percentage points. Yeah. All right, cool. And I want to see the clotheslines, please. Yeah, a lot of them are hanging out right around here. Yeah. Okay, let's turn off the future highs and the future lows real quick. We're gonna get a few more dots here, I think. No? Nope. Okay, so let's see here. That's going there. It's going down to about here. It seems like most of the closes end up making moves. Let me turn this off. Most of the closes end up doing something along these lines. And then if we look over here at our indicator, this big blue box is saying, hey, there's a lot of closes that occur every single month around this area right here. So let's go ahead and highlight this blue for our close. Timestamp this for 2025-02. Okay, 02-23. And let's timestamp this for 12/11. Always want to timestamp your trading expectations so you can keep track of, hey, when did I draw this error? When did I think about this? Why did I think about that? And so, yeah. Moving from technical indicators to statistical indicators have helped me out so much. And don't get me wrong, these are by and large just descriptive statistics indicators. They're not, you know, there's these, dude, if you can do a statistics 1 class, you can do this. And I mean, like, if you could get a C in a statistics 1 class, you can use these indicators. All right, let's get back to the election. But yeah, that would be my expectation looking at the data. Looking at the data, this would be my expectation. And my view is, given the fact that there's really not going to be a very strong majority government going on in Germany, like, okay, it's going to be SPD, CDU, and Green, right? That's, you're going to have Kenya Apocalypse come in, right? You're going to have Kenya Apocalypse come in. And the CDU is not going to be able to get jack diddly squat done. And at some point, they're going to cave, break down the firewall, move it to the AFD. That'll trigger a vote of no confidence. And then you'll end up with another general election before 2029. Like, the writing's on the wall. None of the immigration stuff, none of the debt break stuff, none of the economic plans, immigration, like, all of it's the government's effectively going to be in deadlock, and only minor things are going to get passed effectively. Like, don't get me wrong, maybe Merz will definitely get his coalition by Easter. I mean, I just made a post of this. Oh, I want to pull this up. Look at that. What the hell? Okay. It says I'm still streaming. I can't see the chat at the moment. I have to wait till all this stuff reloads. All right, everything good. All right, everything's good. Everything's good. Everything's good. Yeah. If they don't get the lunatic Green out of the government, it can't end well. Yeah, pretty much. All the woke greenies are a bunch of big old meanies. Let's see here. Yeah, this is what I say. Merz just wants to form a coalition before Easter because he wants to have some political leverage before the Trump-Putin meeting that's expected to happen before Easter. And at that Trump-Putin meeting, we're expected to have either like an official ceasefire done or some actual proper lasting peace going on. Like, Trump and Putin are moving really like rocket fast towards trying to get peace done before Germany can get their shit together. And what I said earlier on in the stream with first Zelensky backpedaling on all the stuff going on with the rare earth minerals in Ukraine, saying, oh, US, well, if you help us out. We'll give you these rare earth materials. And now earlier today, Zelensky's coming out and saying something along the lines of, here, I can pull it up. It's right here. Yeah. Zelensky says, I'll be willing to give up the presidency if it means peace for Ukraine, but only on the condition that Ukraine is given membership into NATO, which is precisely why this whole debacle even occurred. Because Russia was afraid that Europe was going to encroach on Ukraine and make it part of NATO. Like, that was one of the huge thorns that caused this whole shebang. So Russia would definitely not take that condition for Zelensky to step down. However, what I think is that now that Zelensky has said, I'd be willing to step down, all these other political leaders are going to put their fingers in their ears and go la 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 la, and ignore the second part of the conditional bit and just say, yeah, we heard you want to step down, and give us all your rare earth minerals. But that's only conditional on NATO. Yeah, but you said you already wanted to step down, and now you have to go ahead. It's like, once you give an inch, you already are on the back foot to giving a foot or giving a meter or whatever. If you're imperial or metric, whatever. But once you give an inch, and you just keep giving inches, Zelensky right now just keeps giving inches in the negotiations. And so MERS wants to have his coalition done by Easter, before Zelensky gives enough inches for Trump and Putin to have enough material to actually form the peace deal by Easter themselves. I mean, it's a big old theory in my head, but, I wouldn't be too surprised if something along those lines happened.
If the economy continues to suffer, if there's more conflict in the world, then people will be starting to look at, okay, how strong could the AfD get? And then I think what's going to be interesting then is, does the AfD make a concerted effort to try to make itself appear more moderate in anticipation of an election where it would have a much higher chance of being part of a government? And can it create dilemmas for the Conservatives, encouraging more Conservatives to think, actually, ultimately, if they just change this, this, and this, they could be our natural party of government. So that's going to be the kind of meta transition to watch, I think, in the next few years.
If they can change the economy. That's one of the biggest tasks. The faltering German economy, it was a major concern for voters. And it's not just ordinary people who are worried. Last month, Germany's biggest business associations sounded the alarm, saying that the economy must be the next government's top priority. The business leaders said short-term crisis management will not help Germany. We need fundamental structural changes in economic and social policy. So let's take a look now at the main issues. Germany's economy has stopped growing and it is in recession, as you can see here. Economic output has been contracting for the last 2 years. I mean, you have to let that sink in. The economy, GDP, shrank 2 years in a row. Not good news for Europe's biggest economy. And one of the key reasons is falling demand for cars and other German exports. The downturn between December 2023 and November of last year included a particularly steep export decline in October, which you can see there.
Looks like China's taking the Germans' gerbs. They took my gerb. The Chinese took Germans' gerbs.
It's been falling since the energy crisis in 2022 sparked by the war in Ukraine, but the inflation rate, now, it remained high last year, still above 2%. Robert Habeck, the chancellor candidate for the Greens, he says that his party ran a successful campaign despite the economy.
me to just give you a couple of words about the projected results that we've got on an evening that we know is going to be quite a long one before we really know what the results are. Let me begin with what we said before 6 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you for the election campaign. Thank you for joining ranks. Thank you for supporting one another. Thank you for the power that you put into our campaign. This is not something you can take for granted. I have to say it was exactly the election that I dreamed of, the exact election campaign we wanted to wage, and I'm grateful of what we've managed to do. We got ourselves out of the poll dip of 10% when the previous coalition broke apart, and we pulled our election result up closer to what we had, 21. None of this is anything we can take for granted. Thank you to all of our election campaigners. Thank you to the party, to the headquarters, and for the grassroots joining forces. And thank you to Annalena as well. Another thing we have to say, though, is that I wanted more. I think all of us dreamed of a better result. We were hoping to get higher results, and we were there. You know, we were up to 14% just a couple of weeks back, and then something happened that at least changed our election campaign, and that was Friedrich Merz voting in a motion with the AfD, and then many people voted against Merz, and they said we don't want to be in a coalition with the Union bloc. And I understand that, but it did make it harder for us.
All right, we're going to go now to our political correspondent, Julia Saldelli. She is at the Greens headquarters. Julia, I want to ask you, we heard Robert Habeck there trying to explain why things did not go so well tonight, although the party didn't lose that much. But is the feeling there, is there a sense that we just have to be patient, that we will probably end up in whatever new government is formed whenever that takes place?
Well, we're hearing here from members of the party, some of their political leaders telling us that, you know, the game is still wide open. It'll all depend on which parties end up being in the parliament, what kind of majorities that allows to form, and then whether the Greens are needed for a coalition and whether they will be.
Yeah, they sure as hell will be.
Possibly entering a coalition. What we know.
The SPD does not have enough.
They've said this throughout their campaign. They kept saying it tonight. They want to take on the responsibility of government. They feel like they have achieved a lot in the last 3.5 years, and they say they want to continue on that path. On the one hand, they say crucial times are ahead. If we look at the presidency of Donald Trump, of the actions and the propositions that presidency is making, and especially when we look at the situation with Ukraine, what kind of role Europe must play in trying to figure out what happens next with the war in Ukraine. The Greens want to be protagonists in this issue, and they want to set the tone and want to continue to be in government. We also heard from the party leadership here. They say they don't necessarily trust a possible conservative and social democratic coalition to actually deliver on climate being the big issue for the Greens. They say the time is of the essence now. We can't wait 4 years.
Well, if they're left out of the coalition, then the SPD and CDU would have would have a minority government, and then they really wouldn't be able to get anything done.
And that being, of course, we have to do something about climate change. That was
which means no more money for Ukraine.
In this election, is there a sense there that they've lost
and no reform on any energy policies?
In a way, they believe here that actually, even in their election campaign, the Greens feel that they did try to bring the issue of climate forward, that they were trying to make the issue front and center of their campaign, but in general of the political debate in Germany, which is something that doesn't necessarily reflect, for example, in the amount of time that was spent talking about climate in political debates with the candidates and how much climate was even present on election posters. But certainly this time around, after the Greens have been in government and have push forward some measures that are more climate friendly. What has now become an infamous clean heating law that was pushed by the Green Chancellor candidate and Economy Minister Robert Habeck, which was communicated kind of disastrously, it was received kind of disastrously. It was perceived as the government basically taking money out of the pockets of the population. And these are all measures that have not helped make the issue of climate more popular amongst voters.
And Julia, are you hearing there from members of the Greens, maybe are they kind of saying under their breath, maybe they wouldn't want to say it out loud, that they hope that this government that will be formed will not include them, that actually their interests are better served if they spend some time in the opposition?
I have asked this question because I'm also myself wondering maybe it's time for the Greens to go back into opposition and regain some strength. But what I'm hearing here is no, absolutely not. They don't really want to go into opposition. They feel like they have momentum to govern. They really want to take part in government and shape what Germany does in the next few crucial years. They will obviously have to go into opposition if it comes to it, and they say they will play an important role in the opposition if it comes to it, but definitely the priority and the preferred option for them would be to be in government.
Okay. Our political correspondent Julia Saldelli at the headquarters of the Greens here in Berlin. Julia, thank you. And if you're just joining us, this is DW News, special coverage of the German election, and we've got some new numbers, Christine.
That's right. I think I'll start off by saying we heard the Greens Chancellor candidate there saying, we wish it was more. I think that's a universal feeling tonight. But here's that graphic coming on for you there. And as you see it at the top of the list, not necessarily with the most votes actually, but on our graphic here, we've got the SPD coming in there first. But they've actually had the worst results tonight, but we've shifted graphics a little bit there. We've gone over to the parliamentary seating, and now we've come back to the graphic that I was originally talking about. We're just keeping it exciting, making sure that you're up with us here. Yeah, exactly. And we've just done this to make sure that you stay with me. So we'll start with the red bar over there. That would be the SPD. That is the party of the current German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The SPD, Germany's oldest party, coming in at just shy of 16.5% of the vote as it stands. The CDU-CSU at 28, just shy of 29% of the votes. These, of course, are the winners of the night and will likely be delivering the next German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz. The Greens, who we've just been having the conversation about whether or not they are going to be part of a future German government coalition, are in at 12%, having come down a little bit over there. The FDP, this was, of course, one of the parties in the last coalition. You might remember the finance minister, Christian Lindner. They are just shy of 5%, and this means that they may not actually make it into the parliament. Yeah, it was quite an emotional delivery, his speech there at the party press conference, but they're fighting for just a place in the parliament at this stage. The AFD coming in second tonight. This is a strong showing by the far-right AFD, the alternative for Deutschland, or the alternative for Germany, coming in at 20% of the vote. I must say, at some point, there were predictions that we would have a higher turnout or result for the AFD. So it's looking like 1 in 5 Germans, but at some point people were predicting perhaps 1 in 4 Germans would have been voting for the AFD today. The Left Party is among the surprises, really. I think a lot of analysts knew, well, predictions essentially didn't have them coming in just this strong, but they're just over or just shy of 9% of the vote there. Then we have the Sarah Wagenknecht alliance over there, what we call the BSV, also just shy of 5%. Of course, there's that benchmark to be able to get into the parliament, and of course other candidates. We can now show you the seating in the parliament. So 630 seats in the Bundestag, and look at the allocation now. as we're working with these projected results. In fact, one of the things we should tell people is when we are expecting the final results, which is we're looking at Monday, if that's right, Richard, the final results of this election here. But let's have a look at the seating arrangement there. So as it stands, of course, the lion's share does go to the CDU-CSU with 208. The next biggest party is, of course, the AFD with 150 seats, the SPD 120, the Greens, etc. So this is all interesting for, of course, the coalitions and coming together. But these are the results as they stand. And I guess, Brent, you want to pick up with conversations about that coalition forming, right?
Well, I was going to shoot a question to Ben and just ask him, since we were talking about the Greens, the election in 2021.
Let's hear it.
We were hearing from the Greens that fighting climate change is a part of national security, and it's a part of security for Europe. It should be a part of national security for every country. And people seem to get on board that train. And that train derailed somewhere between 2021 and tonight. I mean, is fighting climate change...
People were getting on board, and it derailed.
When we're talking about security issues.
Great.
No, it's not.
Great analogy.
Dealing with geopolitical shift that we've been going through, the Zeitenwende, not the Zeitgeist, but that was the change in times that the Greens and others confronted, and dealing with mastering the climate transition. These are not either-or options. We have to deal with them both, but there is a question of prioritization and the sequencing of that. And I think the Greens have suffered from having the impression they're a party that tries to impose and prohibit things, but they failed to impose the heat pumps and they failed to prohibit the combustion engine. So I think there's a time of reinvention coming for the Greens.
And the combustion engine cars, what is it? You can't sell those after, was it 2035? That's the...
but you'll remember that the German government actually intervened in Brussels to try and get this knocked back as part of the effort to save the German car industry, and it was the numbers you pointed to before. Because Germany is the major victim of the second China shock, having been the beneficiary in Europe of the first one, we're seeing that its economic model is under need of massive review and rejuvenation. And what the Greens haven't convinced people of, I think, is two things. One is that they hold the key to security. They've been one of Ukraine's strongest supporters. They've been strong on defence. But can they manage it at the same time as the climate transition and boosting the German economy? The other part of which has been very difficult for them is convincing people on migration that they have a tough enough policy. I think that is what has hurt them now, as well as the failure to deliver during the term of government they've just had.
But there was a lot of criticism that the Greens were shooting themselves in the foot, but when they pushed for this law to get rid of the combustion engine by 2035, in view of the fact that Germany is a major auto manufacturing country, and the auto industry wasn't prepared for that transition. So did they shoot themselves in the foot?
I
Yes.
think they're actually ahead of the time.
Yes.
A little bit, to be honest. So you said they caught the zeitgeist in the last time, but I think they were ahead of time here. Because if Germany's car industry is to survive, then it should have been at the forefront of the electric vehicle
Shot themselves in the
revolution.
foot a little bit
It's
is a
not,
bit
because
of
they
an
were clinging on too long.
underestimation.
And that was a policy pushed by Lindner and the FDP, among others.
A bit of an
so I think they've
understatement.
suffered from being ahead there, actually, rather than from being behind.
Yeah, maybe then their time will come eventually. So we want to switch gears and go to the man of the evening, the conservative Friedrich Merz. He says that he intends to get down to work on forming a governing coalition as soon as possible. His conservative CDU-CSU bloc, the CSU, of course, the Conservative Party in Bavaria, they're set to become the biggest party in parliament and lead the next coalition government. If the projected results are confirmed, this will cap a remarkable career in politics for Merz. Here's more now on the man likely to become Germany's next chancellor.
This is the man of the moment. Friedrich Merz just led the conservative CDU-CSU to their first election victory since the Merkel years. His pledge? A U-turn on migration and the economy. His style? Decisive, say his followers. Uncompromising, even abrasive, say his critics. Trump-like at times.
He's not Trump-like at all.
If I'm elected to be the Chancellor of Germany, on my first day in office, I will instruct the Federal Ministry of the Interior, using the Chancellor's authority, to permanently control all Germany's national borders with its neighbors.
Zu allen unseren Nachbarn. Dauerhaft zu kontrollieren.
That reaction to a deadly stabbing by an Afghan asylum seeker saw him take a political risk. He crossed his own red line by allowing the far-right AfD, for the first time in German post-war history, to become the deciding factor in securing a majority in parliament. Tens of thousands took to the street in protest. Even Angela Merkel condemned his decision to accept AfD votes rather than seek compromise with other parties of the centre.
She meddled into it.
From my point of view, even under difficult conditions, it should not come to the point where majorities are achieved with the help of the AfD.
While Matt's political maneuver remained unpopular, his determination to act on migration struck a chord.
That got Germany into the
continued to believe his pledge to rule out any future cooperation with the far right.
She's the one who got the debt break passed.
We will not cooperate with the party that calls itself the Alternative for Germany.
Friedrich Merz is in many ways the opposite of Angela Merkel. Their parallel rise to the top of the conservative CDU party in the 90s and early 2000s turned into a political feud when Merkel beat him to become parliamentary party leader. Frustrated, Merz left politics altogether and made his fortune as a lawyer and board member for the American investment giant BlackRock, a career he sees as an asset. Critics fault him for his lack of experience in government, and Merz appears to feel most comfortable talking business. Addressing the global top brass of investors at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he left no doubt over his plans to reform Germany's welfare system.
We have to bring our labor market in order. We have this special sort of subsidies for people who are not working called Bürgergeld, which is a big mistake. We will change the system.
Throughout his campaign, Merz raised the alarm over the state of the German economy. Merz also promises to redefine German leadership, while the outgoing administration shared Merkel's mantra of leading from behind. Merz vows to turn Germany from what he calls a sleeping to a leading middle power.
The overarching maxim of a conservative-led government will be, you can rely on Germany again.
Merz's Germany is back message will instantly be put to the test by Europe's struggle to define a common response towards the new Trump administration and its disruptive take on Ukraine. His analysis of this new reality is sober.
Und wir sind uns heute nicht mehr sicher.
Today, we're not sure anymore if the Americans are still by our side, the way they were after 1945, or if we can still rely on them.
As incoming leader of Europe's largest economy, Merz knows all eyes are on him over whether Germany is ready to take a lead. Friedrich Merz's election victory will drastically change Germany's political outlook. But there are two factors that will determine how much he will be able to translate into action: how complicated forming a government coalition will become, and what Donald Trump will do next. The uncompromising Friedrich Merz will have to compromise fast.
Well, not so long ago, U.S. President Donald Trump said he wasn't aware that Germany was having an election, but since then he's been educated on that, and today he congratulated the winning conservatives and described the election as a great day for Germany. I'm joined now from Washington by our correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber. Benjamin, good to see you. So how is this being seen in the U.S. now that the U.S. president knows what's happening?
A whole lot
That's
of nothing.
right, and he says it's highly anticipated. But a couple of days ago, when he was asked in the White House, he had to ask again, what are the elections that are taking place on Sunday? Well, they told him that they would be the German elections. He wished them luck, saying we have enough problems here. He reacted as the first reaction here from Washington on his Truth Social post and all caps statement. I will just read one part of it. He said, much like the USA, the people of Germany got tired of the no common sense agenda, a term that we're hearing over and over from this new administration, especially on energy and immigration that has prevailed for so many years. This is a great day for Germany and also a great day for the United States. So that's the first reaction that we have here from Washington, that of course is closely following the elections in Germany. We can expect to hear more from the White House and also from the State Department tomorrow.
So U.S. President Trump, he seems pleased. How much does he have in common with the man who will most likely be the next chancellor, Friedrich Merz?
So as we just heard in that report, Friedrich Merz made a fortune as a lawyer. He leading BlackRock in Germany, so that might be something that might it easier for him to talk to Trump. But as we also just heard, he will need to make compromises, not just to form this coalition, to form this government that he also said should be in place as soon as possible for this leading role. That's also something that might make a lot of sense for Donald Trump, who said that he wants to put the United States from a sleepy role to a really leading role, this America First policy. But it is always different, and we have to see what will happen actually when they meet, when they have this first conversation. We know that there are many European leaders eager to talk to Trump as quickly as possible to present themselves, also as type of a mediator when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Trump met with the president of Poland yesterday at CPEC, the first European leader. Next week he will meet with Emmanuel Macron from France and also Keir Starmer from the United Kingdom. So we can imagine that probably Friedrich Merz might be here in Washington too, but it's different to hear what the reactions are right now, saying that they will lead in those conversations, and also what the output will be of those conversations here on the ground in the United States.
And Benjamin, this is an election that took place for the first time that any of us can remember, when the future of the transatlantic relationship has been questioned, and people actually wondering, can the United States still be seen as an ally of Germany? What's the view from where you are?
What the fuck? Of course they can.
That's right. And I think that many actually realized
assumptions
that only when Vice President J.D. Vance spoke at the Munich Security Conference in that really remarkable speech that raised a lot of eyebrows, or even more than that in Europe, not so much here. But that's the big question, how the cooperation will continue, not only with Germany, but also with Europe. Many of high-ranking officials from the U.S. administration have been there. Defense Secretary Hegseth, who was in Brussels, also had different meetings there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So it remains to be seen how the relationship will continue. Also, when we look at the negotiations and the U.S. talking to Russia without including Europeans and not even leaving the option open that they might also have a seat at the table. But what's also really remarkable here is not just the role that President Trump is playing here, but especially what Elon Musk, the role that he has been playing, being really close with Alice Weidel, the head of the far-right AfD party. He has been tweeting his support for the AfD, not only in the last couple of days and only recently. He quoted a video of Björn Höcke, that we can say it's one of the most radical members of the AfD party. He was fined twice for using a Nazi slogan. He can legally be called a fascist, and that was a video that Elon Musk quoted and posted. He has been retweeting a lot from the AfD party convention, so that's definitely also something that led to criticism from many senior members, Friedrich Merz, the likely new chancellor, but also from Robert Habeck, who repeated it recently, saying that the Trump administration is attacking
I want to see that video, man.
The Western values.
What was that video? Benjamin Alvarez Gruber with the latest from Washington. Benjamin, thank you. And our coverage continues now. We want to go for the European view on this election. Let's go to Brussels now. My colleague, Rosie Burchard, is standing by. Good evening to you, Rosie. I know we've got some reaction coming from European leaders. What have we heard?
So indeed, we've had some European leaders already taking to social media to congratulate Friedrich Merz. We've had that, for example, from the Cypriot president, who says that it's an important victory at a crucial moment for Europe. And we've had the Finnish prime minister saying, congratulating Friedrich Merz and saying that this is something which is a strong Germany, he says, is essential for a strong Europe. And let me tell you, that has been the reaction I've heard from diplomats in general over these last few years when we've had difficulties within the German coalition having an impact here in Brussels. I've heard frustration from EU diplomats from other countries saying when they can't see what Germany's policy is going to be in a certain issue, it's hard to set a line here in Brussels. That's been the case, for example, when it comes to European Union policy on China. But but we've also had instances of German coalition politics, meaning that some European policies, for example, on that key issue of combustion engine cars being unpicked or some backtracking. So there is a desire here in Europe to have a clearer line on what the future of Germany's politics will be. Of course, we don't have exact clarity yet, these election results just coming in now. But there's also another big issue here in Europe, perhaps the biggest one. Look at those flags behind me. That's the European Commission headquarters, but there are also flags there of Ukraine. That's because we're approaching this key anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. President Trump across the Atlantic has sent shockwaves through Brussels and other capitals across the European Union, and there's been a real sense that there needs to be a total rethink of how the European Union approaches Ukraine, approaches its support to Ukraine. And over the last few days, there have been huddles of all sorts of different leaders putting their heads together to try and come up with new ideas, how to boost defence spending, how to double down on backing for Ukraine. But the fact is, I've heard some diplomats saying, look, it just seems like there's the wrong man in the room, because they've had Olaf Scholz there representing Germany, and there was the widespread expectation that he would be on his way out.
Well, Rosie, do they feel like Friedrich Merz will be the right man in the room now when they're talking about EU policy and stance towards Ukraine?
Most likely not.
Look, I think there's a sense that Friedrich Merz has spelled out that he wants to continue to be a strong backer of Ukraine, and I think that's something that will be welcomed across the European Union. But there's other policy areas which this will likely have an impact on. Look at the rightward shift that we're seeing in general across this bloc. We saw that reflected in European parliamentary elections back in 2024, so we can expect perhaps the continuation of a push for a more restrictive migration policy. Also a push we've been seeing here in Brussels in general toward deregulation, toward cutting red tape to try and boost the European Union's competitiveness when it comes to competing with bigger powers like China or the United States. And that puts some, especially climate campaigners, in a position of fear. They fear for the future of the European Union's so-called Green Deal, its big green climate promises. But of course, on the other side of the argument, there's those who say simply that Europe has got too much bureaucracy if it wants to stand on its own 2 feet.
DW's Rosie Burchard with the latest from Brussels tonight. Rosie, thank you. Well, German support for Ukraine has also helped to shape the election, as we were saying. Just days after Russia's invasion back in February 2022, Chancellor Olaf Scholz told Parliament the war marked a turning point. Germany cut many commercial ties with Russia, notably ending direct imports of Russian natural gas. And since then, German support has grown significantly. The government says it has so far provided or committed for future years around 28 billion euros in military assistance for Ukraine.
Shit.
That involves weapons and military hardware, including 18 Leopard 2A6 main battle tanks with ammunition and spare parts, 25 self-prepared howitzers, and the Panzer Haubitze 2000.
You mean
and
howitzers?
11 Iris air defense systems. But despite the US, UK, and France supplying longer-range weapons, the Chancellor has refused to provide Ukraine with German-made Taurus cruise missiles.
Yeah, but now Merz likely will be providing
members
those
of the Trump administration, Chancellor Scholz joined
Like,
an emergency
Merz
European
will
summit
explicitly be
in
providing
Paris.
those missiles.
Leaders insisted on having a place at the table when the US and Russia discuss ending the war in Ukraine. Both Moscow and Washington have said there is no role for Europe in the talks. No role for Europe. If you're just joining us, this is our continuing coverage of the German elections. Our chief international editor, Richard Walker, is to my left. To my right is Christine Munwa. She's got the numbers for us. And to my far right is Benjamin Tallis with the Democratic Strategy Initiative. So let me ask you, Ben, what about a place at the table? Is the new German chancellor with a new government, is he going to be able to get a place at the table?
Well, let's be clear about one thing, Brent. No one's going to give Europe a place at the table. We have to earn it, we have to deserve it, we have to grab it. And so that depends on what Friedrich Merz is actually going to do. Now, Merz does seem to understand the gravity of the situation. as mentioned, we don't know if we can rely on the US security guarantee anymore, which is why on Friday we heard Friedrich Merz talk about the possibility of nuclear weapons in Europe and about rethinking Europe's nuclear deterrence. That's a strong signal to be sending, but it'll need to be backed up in reality.
But let's let that sink in. So we're talking about Germany talking about
Pistorius. Yeah, that guy is definitely getting. That guy's definitely replacing Merz.
Now that the election's done, I think we can expect to hear a lot more talk about that. Why? Because we need full spectrum deterrence. We face an enemy in Russia, and let's call it what it is, an
At some point,
that is threatening
he'll
us. We've
replace him.
lost the reliability of our major security guarantor, so we have to be able to defend ourselves, and that means all the way up. And it doesn't mean those kind of
Trump's
numbers,
moving pretty fast, my man.
4% to Ukraine we just saw, which for a country of Germany's size, many people think
He's doing
is
everything he can.
And Germany, remember, was behind 10 other countries in Europe on percentage of GDP in support to Ukraine.
So, Richard, I mean, we've never talked really that much about a nuclear Germany before.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, I'm not sure everybody would have interpreted that from what Merz was saying. So Merz appeared in a TV program and he said that he would definitely need to be talking to the Brits and to the French.
It really is
about
stupid. Yeah.
Potentially sharing their nuclear weapons in the way that, for instance,
you know what?
Germany is part of a sharing agreement with the United States.
Incredibly stupid. Because you know what? Most countries, like the entire time Obama was dealing with Iran, right? The Iran nuclear deal, right, with Hillary, the whole idea was, oh, it's okay if you have nuclear energy, if our enemies have nuclear energy, we just don't want them to have nuclear weapons. And Germany, it's like ass backwards. Oh, we want the nuclear weapons, but we don't want the nuclear energy. It's like your morals and your ethics are totally fucking backwards.
Talk seriously with the German people about it. Now that is a change.
But if you're thinking about the things that would kind of be a challenge to taboos in Germany, well, this would be
huge, right?
This is a jumbo one, you know, given the international commitments that Germany has, you know, as part of the various international agreements that regulate these things. But you're also, and this is kind of knock-on effect of what we're seeing coming out of the Trump administration, is that is also going to fuel similar conversations elsewhere in the world. Yeah. South Korea, Japan. That's right. You know, South Korea, there was already a bubbling conversation about that. You know, so you're seeing ripple effects of people looking at what the Trump administration is saying, American allies in Europe, in Asia, and thinking, oh, okay, what does that mean? And if this taboo explodes, what about that taboo? And so yeah, it's going to be very interesting to follow that, you know, because this is I mean, there are some hot potatoes out there. Yeah, this is about as hot as they get.
This is about as hot as they get. But we have had people in this studio at this table in the past years say that maybe Germany should look at Ukraine. Ukraine once had nuclear weapons as well. They gave them up. They thought they had security guarantees. You see what kind of security guarantees they have today. So the lesson has been maybe Germany should consider not becoming another Ukraine when it comes to being able to defend yourself.
100%, but for that to happen, you need a full range of deterrent options. You don't just need nuclear weapons and a couple of tanks. You need everything in the middle. And actually, this is where Germany has a potential advantage because of the emerging defense technology industry here in Germany, which is one of its real strengths. Down in Bavaria in particular, there are a lot of companies at the Munich Security Conference presenting on this. This is something I think we can expect to see more of because they could rapidly increase German combat power and they could help give Germany the economic boost that Friedrich Merz needs to provide.
I mean, this is one of the kind of striking things about the situation now, that Germany is facing a risk of deindustrialization that is much discussed with respect to its car industry, its chemicals industry. Yeah. And yet, what it needs is a bigger defense industry.
And these are skilled jobs as well. These are good jobs that would be there, which could transfer from one to another.
So this is almost like one of the thoughts that this new government is going to be confronted with is like, okay, can they kind of like flip over an industrial base that is designed for making cars that people don't necessarily want anymore to making weapons that Germany desperately needs in the rest of Europe?
Which the Russians don't want to see, right?
Yeah.
But this you know, it feels like maybe this is the logical result if you're losing the nuclear protection umbrella of the United States. But that's not always the way Europe and the Germans thought that umbrella would be removed, right? I mean, the thinking was that if you never needed it, then there wouldn't be a threat. But now we're looking at there is a threat, and the Americans may not be with us anymore.
Exactly. The Beach Boys School of Security Studies no longer lives. The wouldn't it be nice world that we were in yesterday isn't there. And thankfully, a lot of German
the US would actually remove
what we've not yet seen is that
their
realization
protection on Europe.
Because the Zeitenwende of
What
Olaf
a stupid
Scholz
assumption.
was supposed to reposition Germany in this way, failed across all its 5 main dimensions. Merz's government now has to deliver a real Zeitenwende, including through its commitments to allies.
That's a big task.
And actually, we have a question
go
on
ahead.
that point from one of our viewers who wants to know, will Germany now take a tougher stance against Russia, try to negotiate a deal for both NATO and Ukraine?
Well, we can certainly hope Germany takes a tougher stance against Russia, and there's a lot of people around Europe who will be wanting that, because Germany, frankly, has been missing in action.
There's a
for
lot
good
of
period time
natural
in
gas
European security and
traders
defense. We
right
heard
now who are
earlier
writing their outlooks saying, oh, all this stuff with Germany and Ukraine and Russia going on right now, we better start selling off this nat gas, because, you know, sometime eventually over the next couple of years, we could very easily see nat gas starting to come online here. But I think those traders are getting way ahead of the curve. I think that this next government in Germany is going to be so terribly ineffective that I wouldn't be surprised to see natural gas prices go fucking like sky high, man. I wouldn't be surprised.
It's hard to understand that question. To answer
I wouldn't
that
be
question,
surprised.
Because, yeah, I mean, of course, his Conservative Party won this by a significant margin, but it's their second worst result ever. 28.65%, the current projections. Yeah. It's not a lot.
But you're right, on the industry part, it's incredibly important
party that has lost
to have energy.
Support, the Social Democrats losing an election but ending up in government, or potentially with 2 parties, depending on how the coalition maths shakes up. So it's maybe just too hard to answer that question. But I would agree with what Ben said.
You've got to say, right, do what you can with what you have where you are, and that's part of leadership, and that's what we've got Merz for, isn't it?
Yeah, but we just don't know yet how strong his position is going to be, I think, and to what extent he's going to be buffeted around by events, and events in the human form of Donald Trump. You know?
Beyond his control.
And I think there's a very strong sense of that Europe is being blown around at the moment by Trump force gales. And Merz is about to be in the middle of that. And a lot of Europeans are looking to Germany to lead. I was in Munich as well, and there were people...
It's disgusting.
British people, like members of the British Parliament, standing up and saying, when is German leadership going to come? And Merz is signalling that's what he wants to do. But the question is, when he's in a coalition with a potentially difficult partner, when he's dealing with countries around him that have potentially slightly different interests or emphasis on interests, you know, all in theory, you can say, I'm serious about this, I'm serious about it. But it's in the doing that is the test of it. And we just don't know yet. And we don't know how difficult the circumstances are going to be for him.
We don't know, but what we do know is that you're watching DW News special coverage of the German election. Yeah, that's right. We do know that much, and we know that there are some new numbers in.
That's right. So why don't we just take a look at how those numbers are being projected as they've come in, and one of our viewers has just tuned in, guys, and he says, what does this all mean, and who is the CDU? I've seen that they've won, and who are they going to collaborate with? We'll maybe get to that in a moment, but why don't we just start by looking at those results, and we're going to show you a graphic now. Here it is. So the SPD, this is the first bar you see in red. This is the party of the current Chancellor, Olaf Scholz. This has been Germany's sort of ruling party, the biggest party in the coalition. They have come in at, well, right now are projecting at about 16.4% of the vote. Just bearing in mind, this is not the final tally, but this is a very good projected result that we're getting in the percentages here. In first place tonight is that big block you see in black, and that is the the centre-right CDU-CSU party. We've been talking a great deal now about a Friedrich Merz, who will likely be Germany's next chancellor. He leads that party, which has been in opposition. You might remember that this was the party of Angela Merkel here in Germany for a long time. And now below them, well, not in order of the results of this election, but in this graphic, you see the Greens, who have been in the last coalition government, who have come in at 12%.
There's a lot of people calling the election rigged.
In the last election. I remember a time where the Greens were the rising stars in German elections, Brent. The FDP in yellow over there, just coming in shy of 5%. That is the 5% that is needed to make it into the Bundestag, the German parliament. So that is the FDP, the business-friendly FDP, we like to say here, led by Christian Lindner, who was Germany's finance minister. You might remember, if you know German politics well, that the collapsing of the last government, he was one of the key players in that. And then you will see the blue block over there. That is the AfD, the AfD, the alternative for Germany. This is the far-right party that comes in at 20% of the vote. And I think later we should maybe just show everybody a map of the country and where AfD voters are concentrated in the country. That tells a very interesting story. We'll get that to you in our coming coverage. But they're coming in at just about 20% of the vote. And we have to point out it's a strong showing, but there were some predictions that that could be even higher than what it's come out to be now. The Left Party, which really would probably be the only surprise of the night at this stage, coming in stronger than what was initially expected. And then the BSV, we have the Sarah Wagenknecht alliance also coming in just shy.
I'm not totally sold on it being rigged. I haven't seen anything that
so these are the projections,
proves that there's any rigging that went on.
Of course, the others. But why don't we just show you an overview of the seating in the Bundestag now, in 630 seats. And so right in the middle, they
they could argue that there was a lot of immigrants that might have voted.
For the majority, and we'll look at
right, a lot of immigrants.
But just have a look now at the lion's
new
share,
naturalized immigrants that voted.
The CDU-CSU party has managed to garner there with 208 seats, but that's still not enough to govern. So they will still need a coalition partner. Look at
I don't think there's.
the SPD,
I don't think this election was
so you
rigged.
can almost see, well, you can actually see that you just take the red and the black, and there you've got it. You've got your majority. So that's a possible coalition. But then you've got the Greens over there, and of course you've got the AfD, who are likely not going to be invited into any government forming right now. There is what we call here in Germany the Brandmauer, which we'll hear a little bit about from our experts at the table. And then, of course, in the purple there is the Left Party at 63 seats. Why don't we show you now what could possibly be a coalition? I mean, we could sort of get a hint of that looking at this graphic, but let's have a look at possible coalitions now, given the numbers that we have. And there we have it, 630 seats, and you see that there, right? SPD, CSU, and you might remember people watching
that's
that
a grand coalition.
We call a grand coalition here. So that would be that, although they do say it's not so grand nowadays because the numbers are much smaller.
It's just like Back to the Future, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So that could possibly be it, right? So the party of the outgoing Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, coming back together with the party of the party that was leaders previously, the biggest party, the CDU-CSU, with Friedrich Merz as the Chancellor. Let's see if we have other potential possible coalitions there. Let that come up in a second. And I guess maybe we can also talk a little bit about how the parties are aligned on certain issues. But here's another possible one for you there. Well, is it a possible one?
No.
Theoretically, look, if the CDU and the AfD were to come together, I mean, that would be even a stronger majority than what the CDU would have with the SPD. But there is this Brandmauer.
The firewall. But that gets back to the question that the viewer that you were mentioning had asked, you know, is Friedrich Merz following the will of the people if he ignores the AfD and the fact that they did get 20%?
Well, based on the notion that democracy is about substance as well as form, yes, he is. Because it's widely understood by the mainstream German democratic parties that the AfD is not a democratic party. That's why the firewall exists. And to surrender that at this stage would be betraying the massive German turnout. I think this could be a very easily applied logic by anyone who's governing. Now, the more the AfD were to get, which would happen if this government fails to deliver, I think we can safely say, then that would start to come into question.
Okay.
But for now, I think there's a solid argument.
Let's go to, I want to go to our chief political editor, Michaela Kufner. She's at CDU headquarters. And Michaela, we just looked at the numbers, and I want to ask you, since we're talking about the firewall, are you hearing there? Do we see Michaela? There she is, yes. Let me ask you, are people there telling you that the firewall held tonight?
Did the firewall hold?
Saying, look
before
at the
we
numbers,
get to the question here.
of the voters said no to the AFD. Is that the way they're interpreting it?
It's not how it should be interpreted.
Well, that firewall is rock solid. Friedrich Merz himself, who stands accused of having put some cracks into it after accepting far-right AFD votes in a motion recently in Parliament and get that across the finish line for the first time in history. He himself has pegged his own political future to maintaining that firewall. And because it looks such an obvious choice that there is a conservative stroke far-right majority in Germany, a lot of people vote CDU, the Conservatives, because there is a firewall to the far right. So the interpretation here is that it would be political suicide to go into one camp with a far-right AFD, which has as its own declared aim, and I've spoken to one of its founders, that was the aim, to destroy the conservative CDU-CSU as one of the last remaining Big Ten parties in Europe. And we've just seen the Social Democrats go further downhill. They are being crushed as a Big Ten party, and that could likely and would likely happen to the CDU. So that issue isn't being questioned, particularly since the far-right AFD party is in part suspected of undermining democracy itself here in Germany, and may face further investigation. So you don't want a coalition partner who's suspected of undermining democracy itself. So it's not quite as easy as
I've just heard the propaganda that this lady is spewing so many times. I'm so bored of what this chick is saying. More. Wow, your theory isn't that far off. The CDU should just form a minority government and do whatever. I mean, they'll be super ineffective and not get any other policy done. But also, a bit more specifically, they could form a majority with the SPD and the CDU. But it's going to be super, super tight. So if there's any dissidents in the CDU, if there's any dissidents in the SPD, they're not going to get anything passed. Anything passed. So that means that the CDU and the SPD essentially have to be lockstep. But if they include the Greens, then they can make up for any little dissenters in the CDU SPD. But in doing that, the Green Party is going to want additional concessions. So and then at that point, you're back where you were as far as being able to move your agenda forward from the CDU's perspective.
Migration, particularly from other safe countries within the European Union into Germany, while at the same time offer a much faster track to migrant workers, skilled labor, which he...
Honestly, if the SPD can concede on some immigration stuff, they could form the next coalition and just make it... They could form a grand coalition officially. But unless the SPD holds their guns, you know, they hold their policy for the immigration stuff, it's not going to work. They're going to need the Greens to get stuff done. And at that point, you're not getting any immigration crap done. And at that point, AFD and Linke is not going to vote in favor of the debt brake constitutional amendment, which you need 2/3 of the Bundestag to vote for. So if you don't have AfD, if you don't essentially have the rest of the Bundestag to vote with you on that constitutional amendment change to increase the debt limit in Germany so then they can send more money to Ukraine, this is not going to work.
Because we have good candidates in the federal states. We have run a good campaign and we have a better program because we want to pursue policies for
I mean, whether or not the Greens are in the next coalition or not, they'll probably still vote to increase the ceiling. The AfD might, if they get, again, concessions on immigration, they'll vote against it otherwise.
The reaction wasn't quite as cheerful, or maybe not as loud as I expected.
Because they just want to make sure that the money from the debt ceiling, the debt brake being removed in Germany, doesn't just all go to Ukraine. That some of it goes to border security.
All right, our political correspondent Matthew Moore, he is at the headquarters of the AfD. Matthew, you heard it there from the party's co-chairman. You conducted that interview. Do you get a sense that the AfD is it a party that is satisfied this evening?
Very
much so, Brent. Look at the big picture.
Yeah, I called it.
That was really in a bad way at the last election because it lost on its previous result. It was really going nowhere. And
yeah, you're right. They do have a huge negotiating
as we just
call.
heard in that interview,
Card.
the Ukraine war,
they
Russia
do.
invaded Ukraine in 2022. That triggered off a series of issues. So there was the rising energy prices, migration numbers started to go up again. The number of irregular migrants arriving in Germany went up. And then also the economy in Germany here has been in recession for 2 years. And all of that came together to really deliver this perfect combination of issues that the AfD has just jumped on. And they've been able to define themselves really quite sharply against the other parties. And tonight they've doubled their result. And they will be a very much enlarged and much more emboldened presence in the German Bundestag. They've not just doubled their votes, but they're also going to have well more than double the number of seats, and that's going to just change the tone of the debate in the parliament, and them just continuing to hammer on this issue of migration is going to have just put major pressure on the political parties that do make it into the coalition in the end.
Matthew, we've got about a minute left. Let me ask you, what are you hearing there about the impact, the influence of Elon Musk and the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance met with the AfD Chancellor candidate Alice Weidel last week. I mean, they've been very open about their support for the AfD. Do people feel like that made a difference tonight?
Yeah, people thinking America's anti-Germany.
So yeah,
stupid.
I mean, you speak to anyone around the AfD orbit, and most of them will say that it can only help the AfD when you have people like Elon Musk and J.D. Vance coming out and batting for your corner. But the main thing I think is that it just normalises this party, it makes them very difficult to ignore.
Yeah.
And one of the most fascinating things
I
that's
like this
happened
guy's
in the last few
commentary.
weeks is that the AfD's position on the war on Ukraine, their position has now been taken up by the people in the White House. So in a way, the issues that they've been campaigning on are now dominating it when it comes to the war in Ukraine. So for them, they really feel like this is really helpful to normalise them in Germany and also around the world. And it will only put them in good stead as they look to increase their vote share in the next elections in 4 years' time. And that's what they've got their eyes on, Brent, is 2029.
I have to say, I'm in lockstep mentally and strategically what this guy is talking about, because I just realized, J.D. Vance going to meet with Alice Weidel. Notice how other commentators said, it's very likely that Alice Weidel is likely going to be the head of the AfD into the 2029 election, or if it occurs sooner, whenever it occurs. So, when's the next election for the U.S. presidential election? It's 2028. Who's the current expected incumbent for that? It's going to probably be J.D. Vance. And Vance is doing a really great job politically. He's doing a fantastic job. So the fact that he met and gave his good graces to Alice Weidel. And if all this shit goes kaboom politically for the for the CDU rather, dude, the US is gonna be totally behind Germany's back. Totally behind Germany's back. And I just said it's so smart. It's incredibly smart. It really makes me respect JD Vance a whole lot because he's doing something that could ensure good relations with the largest economy in Europe, to be on very, very, not just admirable, but very friendly, positive, constructive political terms with Germany. If towards the end of the current term, you know, this is by 2027-ish, 2028, Vance is seen as the front runner and Weidel gets in, like, that is, it's playing, it's putting down the chess pieces today in a way that helps create that path forward. Like the 2030s relationship for the US and Europe are literally being formed today with Weidel and Vance. Like the politics of the 2030s are being formed by Weidel and Vance today. It's incredibly forward-looking. Yeah, well, it's incredibly forward-looking. It really makes me respect Vance a whole lot. And I'm pretty sure that this stream is done now. Yeah. DW News is all done. Which means we're most likely done with the stream here too-ish. I do have a few things I wanted to say, which is mostly I'm going to be clipping this stream up. I know it's a like 3-hour stream at this point, but you know, there's a bunch of stuff that I've said and I want to put it together in a video, and because this is a whole political thing, I want to make sure it all comes together. Also, for some reason, I've started thinking maybe instead of streaming to the Plan the Profit channel, I should be streaming on my personal Joe Boss channel. Because from what I see, people are more likely to actually click on a channel when it actually says a person's name rather than when it says like, oh, Plan the Profit, what the fuck? Rather than you click on, you see Joe Boss and it's like, oh, okay, who's Joe Boss? What's that guy about? Right? What's that guy? What he's thinking? What is he thinking about? What does he do? So that's what I'm thinking about getting into, is still doing exactly the same content with the indicators and the whatnot. Just I'm looking for ways to optimize the YouTube experience, the YouTube game, get things growing. I'd like more people to join the trading group to get access to my indicators, to use stuff, right? So I'm going to do what I can to try and grow. And by the way, the server is going to, I'm pretty certain I'm going to keep it as Plan the Profit, but if changing it to Joe Boss's Discord helps, then I'll just do that. I don't care. I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, let's just get the growth train going. What can we do to get things moving along here? And so we'll go ahead and continue the streams for a good bit. Keep the content going, and I'm gonna try and keep this energy up and keep the commentary, like the commentary I gave today, going in the future streams and future clips and whatnot. You know, we'll see. We'll see how things go. Hopefully everything works out. You always hope it works out when it comes down to YouTube bullshit. Anyways, I really appreciate everyone who's watched this so far, and especially Harold and Babala for hanging out in the chat, and also saw Max hop in a little earlier, so thank you guys very much for watching. I'm sure you guys have already liked and you guys are already subscribed, or you already got notifications to see this stuff, so always appreciate it. And yeah, really look forward actually to the next stream here. When is the next stream? I do have my streams planned out, so real quick, content live, the next stream, February 28th? Really? And no. Okay, so it says like the next stream is planned for February 28th, but I'm gonna find something here real quick. I mean, I know if I go to my group notes here real quick. If I go to my weekly Outlook notes, open calendar. Let's see here. German federal election, so we've done that one. BOE Bear, Bank of Canada, Bank of England, RBA. So there's just a bunch of speeches going on here. Nothing terribly crazy on Monday. So for certain, no stream tomorrow. I mean, I'd like to do a stream tomorrow, but you know what? If I can get away with not doing a stream tomorrow, I can get some more programming done. I'll tell you what. Absolutely appreciate it, Harold. Yeah, I'll see you in the Discord for sure. I mean, I'm almost freaking in there. You saw me posting in there all throughout the stream. Going in here, hopping down to the research forum, finding the topic, posting the thing in, right? Russia-Ukraine war, federal election. And now that the German federal election is done and done, I mean, it's not totally done and done, but at some point I'm going to be right-clicking and hitting lock post on this in the next 24 hours. Let's see. Okay. I think it's going to be mostly Australia focused, right? There's a stream we could do for Australian CPI, and then another stream we could do for Australian RBA meeting, so on Tuesday and Wednesday. Oh, okay. Well, one thing for certain, I'm gonna create this now. I'll create it actually after I end the stream. We'll have a stream for US GDP when that comes out. So on Thursday and then on Friday. Yeah. So there's going to be 2 sets of meetings here. So Thursday and Friday, we're for sure having streams. And for these 3 days, I think I'm just going to focus on indicators and working on clipping this stream, because the stream was so good and full of good stuff. Alrighty, you guys. With that all said and done, I will see you all in a bit. And if you want to hang out, I'll be hanging out in the Plan the Profit Discord. Just come on in, ping me in the general. And if you are doing any research or you do want any help finding out something about any of the stuff that you know, any of these research topics, literally just ask, right? It's not like there's a billion people asking me questions right now. Like the server's fairly inactive, so it's like, hey, it's very easy to get a response from me right now. Alrighty. See you guys in a bit. Cue the outro music.